How are you feeling? How long have you been here?
3 months, May 17th.
And what brought you?
That's difficult to answer.
Eventually resulted in your being here in the hospital.
That's difficult to answer.
is the end. There's a noise inside my head of crying people facing death. Is this the end? Is this the end? Oh, I'm burning in the stone. There's no place to hide. I'm burning in the stone. What have we done to the world? What have we done to the world? I'm burning in the stone. There's no place to hide. I'm burning in the stone.
Who the fuck is Karlyn? She's just some sweet lady. She's like in a knitting. She does like a knitting stream. She's like a knitting YouTuber. She does knitting.
Can we grow up a little bit and
Alt
not
Girl
be
sent $200.
retarded?
Have you seen the
Please.
work of Karlyn Borysenko? Anti-commie cult leader and is obsessed with looking at what actual far-left communists are talking about and organizing today, infiltrating them. They infiltrated the universities, schools, media. She has the receipts to back it up. Primary source evidence. Infestation is dire and she calls Republicans idiots eating slop. Agree.
Thank you for the big super chat. Yeah, oh, I know Karlyn B. She's solid. She's funny. I
The
like
Great
her.
Noticer sent $200.
Literally,
So
not
it's,
Ian.
it's not because I haven't dangled my junk into the combat zone on purpose to get some camera footage, but that's the big part of what's the
Is
problem.
that what you call reporting?
Go
and live
under if
streaming?
you're going to do it.
Yeah,
go
seriously.
undercover. Otherwise, you're wearing a hunk of meat in a lion's den. Nick Shirley, I love you. Take care of yourself, man. Karlyn Borysenko went undercover. Do stuff like that. Like if you want to expose this thing, don't pariah, please.
But Ian, here's and I agree with you to an extent.
What up? What up? What up? I had to make sure I was not muted for a second. I'm so used to going live when I'm muted that it's just like it's new for me when I go live and I'm not actually muted. So it's a good thing I didn't say anything incriminating. Guys, do you know what I did for today? I don't know how normal people function. I don't know how normal people function. I really don't. I was shopping for Thanksgiving for 3 hours today. Do you know how unheard of it is for me to be outside of my house for 3 hours, let alone shopping at multiple stores in which to gather all the ingredients I needed for Thanksgiving? Because I had to go to Whole Foods because I ordered most of our food from Whole Foods. I'm gonna cook it and everything, but like I said, I had them set aside a turkey and just some like trimmings and stuff because there's just stuff that I don't feel like making mashed potatoes. Okay. Mashed potatoes are a pain in the ass. I will order the mashed potatoes from Whole Foods pre-made, and then I will heat them up and add more butter to them on the day of. I'm not like but I don't need to be fucking around with mashed potatoes, okay? And then and I got a giant ass pie because there was a brown sugar apple pie, and Victor loves apple pie, and I was like, man, so I had to go to Whole Foods. But Whole Foods is really expensive for like, boring things. Like I had to get stuff for my brine, like molasses and soy sauce and honey. And if you buy that shit at Whole Foods, it's going to be like several more dollars than just driving down the street to the Market Basket, which is, if you're not in New England, Market Basket is like you don't under like there is a lore around Market Basket. Market Basket is this cultish little grocery store that they mostly exist in Massachusetts, but we have some in New Hampshire as well. And it's like an old time grocery store. It's like you go into the Market Basket and you go back in time. Like all of the people who work at the grocery store are dressed up in like drugstore like coats and stuff like that, and they all look like respectable grocers from like, you know, the 70s or something like that. And it's just actually kind of a cool place to shop, and the prices tend to be better. So I went down the road to the Market Basket and I got most of the stuff I needed. But you know what? Like when I'm cooking things on Thanksgiving, I'm sometimes lazy about it because I don't cook normally. So even like getting me to do anything, it needs like I try to get as much pre-done as possible. Also, I don't like chopping up vegetables. And so I was like, man, I can get these onions and this celery at Market Basket, but then I'm going to have to chop it up on Thanksgiving morning to put it all in the stuffing and stuff like that. But if I drive to another store, I know I can just buy it pre-chopped, so I don't have to do it. And so then I had to go to a third store just to satiate my my own laziness from not wanting to chop onions and celery on Thanksgiving morning. And there were a couple other things that I could only get at that. Like, why can't there just be one fucking store? Why do I have to go to 3 different stores in order to procure all of the ingredients that I need? This is just me and Victor. I'm not cooking a huge meal here. Well, it is going to be a huge meal, but like, why? Why? I just don't understand it. I don't understand it at all. But you know what is the best store to go to? You know what store? Like, I just like, listen, do you know the very best place to shop? I'm going to tell you guys a secret. The very best place to shop is the weed dispensary. Do you know why the weed dispensary is the very, very, very best place to shop? Like, supermarkets suck. Malls suck. Malls are all brown now. Everyone's brown and speaking Spanish. The weed dispensary is a great place to shop. And it's not just because you leave with weed. It's always a pleasant experience. First of all, you get to order online. So you order what you want online and you have them put it aside for you. And then you just walk in and there's no guesswork. It's all, you don't have to have a discussion with anyone. You just go up to the counter and you give them your ID, and then they give you a bag of weed, and then you pay them. And you know, I'm not saying that I would ever do this because obviously I don't do drugs at all, and no one should ever do drugs. But like, I am told from others the dispensaries now just hook into your bank account, and so you don't even really have to give them like your credit card or cash or anything like that. Like, everything's just done, and you walk into the dispensary and they hand you a bag and everyone's happy. This is really the key to the weed store. Everyone is happy. No one is ever upset when they're at a weed dispensary. No one. The staff is not upset. The customers are not upset. Literally every single person is in a good mood. No one's being pissy. No one's starting any sort of stupid fight. Like, you get in, you get out, you get your thing, and you go home. And it's like the best experience of any capitalist endeavor ever. And it's just like, why can't it all be like this? Why can't it all be like this? Why do malls have to be filled with brown people speaking Spanish in New Hampshire? Why do grocery stores not have everything I want in one fucking store so that I have to go to 3 different stores to spread the capital? I don't understand. I like, this is 2025. Haven't we figured this shit out yet? I don't get it. I don't get it. Anyway, so that's what I did for most of the day today. Hey, do you guys want to see something that I discovered last night? This is before we get to our main show. Our main show is going to involve a socialist professor at Kansas State University. But I may have accidentally stumbled onto something, and I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about it. I haven't quite figured this out yet. This is still a process where I am figuring out what exactly I stumbled upon, and maybe some of you guys will have some ideas, and maybe we can talk about it. Let me get the chat on the screen and all that good stuff. Okay. So, you guys who remembers yesterday? Who remembers yesterday when we read this zine, which is How to Report ICE in New York City, and we were particularly focused on a couple of things. We were focused on the fact that there is now a hotline, which if you are a person in New York, there is now a hotline that you can call if you see ICE in your neighborhood to start to warn people that ICE is in the neighborhood and that they to try to like basically have a rapid response team come out so that all the commies can come out and protect their neighbors from being deported, blah, blah, blah. We also noticed there was a QR code on this, which leads to Letitia James's office, where you can fill out a form to report a federal action. And that also seems suspicious to me. That also seems suspicious. So I started thinking about this, and I sent a couple, to go back to the hotline here. I sent, first of all, I called the hotline last night and no one answered. But you know what happened? As soon as I called the hotline and no one answered, I kind of hung up, and immediately I got a text message. Sorry, we missed your call. How can we help? And it's also in Spanish. And I said, hi, I'd like to report ICE, but who runs this hotline? And the person said, this hotline is run by volunteer New Yorkers just trying to keep our neighbors safe. We do appreciate the questions, but we try to keep the phone lines clear for ICE sightings. If you'd like to ask more questions, you can call after 8 p.m. and leave a message, and if we have an answer, we'll get back to you. And I said, well, I have an ICE sighting, but it feels weird to tell that to people when I don't know who they are. Do you work for the city or Letitia James's office? Just to get right to the point. And they responded, we do not, just volunteers who felt this was a critical gap that needed to be filled. While the hotline staff is taking measures to protect both staff and hotline callers, we also get that these immensely difficult times and understand why it feels weird to tell people if you don't know who we are. Definitely encourage you to share the sightings with other trusted networks if you don't trust us. Well, that was an interesting interaction. And so I was like, okay, well, we now know that they're not working with Letitia James's office. And like, listen, maybe this is just me because I live and breathe socialism and communist activism and all that stuff. When I read those text messages, they had a certain cadence to them, didn't they? Didn't those text messages sound a lot like what we would expect a socialist to say? Not just like there's and new people might know. Wait, I'm not done yet. New people might not understand this, but there is a certain cadence with which socialists speak that when you read enough of their stuff, you start to get a sense of like, even if they aren't saying any keywords, it's like you're talking like a socialist, and it's almost like an inquantifiable thing, but it's just like they have a very specific way in which they speak. And I was like, those messages sound like they were written by a leftist. So I decided to go do a little bit more research. I went back, and how I found this zine originally is I was trolling around Blue Sky, and I was looking at Emmy O'Brien's Twitter feed. And of course, Emmy O'Brien is one of our favorite queer Marxists. And Emmy O'Brien had retweeted the original NYC zine that is from. Now, when you click on this, it's a weird thing because when I downloaded this is what I saw. I saw no preview available. File is in owner's trash, which means that the person who created this file had moved the file to their trash, but you could still download it. So the zine that we looked at yesterday was the one that had gotten moved to the trash, but that you could still download because I downloaded it because of course I did. But then I kept looking at Blue Sky essentially. And I eventually made my way over to this person. So you can see here, this is the person who actually created the original zine. And I was like, why was the zine moved to their trash? And of course, my thought process is there must have been an update to this zine, and that's why she trashed the other one. So I went to try to find the new version of the zine. And lo and behold, let me make this bigger. Lo and behold, this person pinned to the top of their Blue Sky has 70 plus printable how to report ICE zines with the salute protocol and local hotlines all over the country. And I was like, excuse me, what? This is outside of New York City? Excuse me, what? And then I clicked on her Google Drive link and I found this. And this is her Google Drive. And if you notice here, there is a zine request form. So presumably, all of the zines that this person has created were requested at some point, because otherwise, how would she have all these fucking hotline numbers? So you go into the zines in English, and they are also in Espanol, which I know we all appreciate. And you find all of these different fucking zines. Wyoming, Wisconsin, Washington State, Virginia, Vermont, St. Louis, Rhode Island, Portland, Phoenix, New Mexico, New Orleans, New Haven, Memphis, Massachusetts, Maryland, Kansas City, Indianapolis, Florida, Delaware, DC metro area, Colorado, and then these folders, these folders all have multiple zines because they're all the different they're multiple states. So if you go into California actually has Northern and Southern California, all sorts of shit in there. All sorts of stuff. We've got zines from California, Illinois, Minnesota, New Jersey, New York State, North Carolina, Pennsylvania. And do you know exactly how many zines there are? There's about 70. There's about 70 fucking zines. Because what I did last night was I downloaded every single fucking one of those zines. And I made sure we had a copy of every single one of those zines. And then I spent about 3 hours last night reverse engineering the hotline numbers to find out what groups are running the hotlines. Because it turns out that if you just put the hotline number into Google, you will start to find the groups running the hotlines. And so I now have an entire fuck off spreadsheet of all the different groups that are running all of these rapid response hotlines. Now, most of these groups are kind of generic immigrant rights groups, which I think we would expect that, right? But there's a couple interesting things that I found in doing this exercise, and I haven't been able to do a deep dive into all of it yet because I finished the spreadsheet at like 4 a.m. last night. So oh no, it gets better. It gets better. You guys are gonna love this. It gets better. But in the process of Googling all this stuff, I started to notice some things that maybe you might call them coincidences. Master Shake, you're going to love this. So, there's a couple things that I noticed. In a couple of these zines, they are actually being linked to, these hotline numbers are being linked to by local government, especially in California. So, what that means is, now, all of these groups that have set up these hotlines, so far as I can tell, they are not state agencies. However, many state agencies are linking to these groups and these hotlines from their website, especially in the state of California. So if you go onto the local state of California website and you're like looking up like stuff for immigrants that the state of California offers, the state of California, or the local governments in California are linking their residents to these hotlines to call and report ICE. Now, as a reminder, what these hotlines are doing know your rights training. So they're doing know your rights trainings to try to prevent people from being deported. They are organizing in communities to coordinate anytime someone spots ICE to get that information out while you're looking at the groups. It's all in a spreadsheet, bro. I'm not going to go over all the groups. So there are some city governments and local governments that are linking directly to these groups to try to get immigrants to engage in this type of stuff. Oh, it gets better. Oh, you guys are going to love this. I also found more than a few local ACLU chapters who are also linking to these hotlines off of the official local ACLU chapter webpage. And I bet there's many more than I found too, because I wasn't really looking for that. Like if it came up in the Google search, I would add it to the document, but I wasn't doing a deep dive into any of them to try to figure out how many of them, because I didn't have time to do it. I only had a couple hours last night before I had to go to sleep, right? So there's more than a couple local ACLUs that are also sending people to these immigrant rights Know Your Workshop, Coordinating Against ICE working groups all over the country. But here was the really big one for me. Check this out. Check this out. Hang on, I'm going to cough. Hang on. One sec. You guys are going to love this. It's going to be totally worth it. Oh my God, I've got like something stuck in my throat, I feel like. Oh my God, one sec. Always at the worst time. Always at the worst time. Damn. All right. So, going back to this New York one right here. Oh man, hang on. Jeez, crow. You know, Victor just came home sick like 2 hours ago. This is what's happening. My husband did this. My husband did this. I didn't get my husband sick this time. My husband is getting me sick because he just came home sick a couple hours ago. Hang on. No, I know. Ah. God damn it. This is not cool, man. It's not cool. Okay. I think I'm done having a coughing fit. I think I can talk now. Okay. Yeah, it's over. Stream over, stream over, stream over. Okay. So going back to this New York one. So look at this hotline number, 229-304-8720. So I looked up that number, and one of the first things that came up is this Instagram profile right here. New York City ICE hotline. If you see ICE, call or text, blah, 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 blah. This is from an organization called Flood the Streets NYC. Okay, got about 4,000 followers, and you can see here. Oh, look at this whistle thing. I didn't even notice this. A whistle is a simple tool to help keep our communities safe. Who would have thought it? So this is the post with the number. But there's something really interesting about this that I want you guys to see. Okay, look it up here. Flood the Streets NYC and 5 others have posted this. Check this out. Collaborators. Immigrant Justice NYC DSA, JFire JNYC, I don't know, or JFRE JNYC, I don't know what that is. I don't know who that is, but I know who this is. The 5051 movement. The 5051 movement is a collaborator on this New York City hotline. Excuse me? Does anyone know who the 5051 movement is? The 5051 movement is one of the major groups behind the No Kings protest. The 5051 movement has funded all of the major progressive protests all year long. They partner with Indivisible, and Indivisible's in on this shit too, by the way. But look at this. Listed as a collaborator, and this is actually their Instagram. Look at this. Over almost 600,000 followers. This is actually their Instagram. In order to be listed as a collaborator on something, you need to actually approve it. So what that means is this is not like Twitter, okay? This is not like Twitter where I can tag anyone and their mother and the tags show up regardless of if they even see the post or not. In order to be listed as a collaborator on a post on Instagram, someone who is running the account has to click OK. Otherwise, you cannot add the account as a collaborator. So listen, I know this is circumstantial and maybe a little weird, but it seems to me as though the 5051 movement is collaborating on these anti-ICE hotlines, which to me seems to be kind of like, I don't know, a national coordinated effort, not just in New York. This is a nationally coordinated effort, and we know it's a nationally coordinated effort because we have all of their fucking zines, not that one. Where the fuck is it? This one. All of their propaganda are the same. They're using the same propaganda. They're using, in some cases, if you look at the naming conventions for these hotlines, the naming conventions are the same. If you go onto these websites, they're all coordinating with each other. So here is what I think. Here's what I think. I think this might be the first time that I have ever actually seen convincing evidence of progressive organizations working alongside far left organizations in the anti-ICE organizing effort. And the reason I think that is I think far leftists have gotten themselves into the progressive organizations, just like the Groypers have gotten themselves into the GOP. I think it's kind of the same thing. But what this means is this is now connected to local government. This is now connected to the ACLU. This is now connected to the 50-51 movement. And they're all using the same propaganda. They're all using the same talking points. They're all passing out the same information to the people who are doing this. They're being linked to from local fucking government websites to get immigrants that are trying to avoid deportation to successfully avoid ICE. How is this not a nationally coordinated conspiracy to undermine the operations of the federal government? I know this is kind of circumstantial evidence, but to me, if organizations are coordinating and partnering with each other and linking to each other and supporting each other, and they're sending people back and forth and they're sharing resources and they have all the same talking points and they have all the same propaganda, and we know that, okay, so the far left is not funded by George Soros. We know that fine, but 50-51 has major financial backers. I don't know exactly who they are, but obviously they do. Indivisible is actually funded by George Soros. That is actually true. Okay. So how is this not a nationally coordinated effort to undermine the operations of ICE that is directly connected to major progressive funding sources? Am I wrong? Because this to me seems like the boogeyman that conservatives have been waiting for. And to me, and listen, I think that this is actually really important, because if the far left groups are actually pulling the resources from the progressive groups, and again, we have never had evidence of this happening before. There's never been evidence of this type of direct coordination, okay? So if that's actually happening, if the Trump administration can, I don't know, get off their asses and actually go after the funding of the progressive groups that are supporting this, then perhaps a lot of the anti-ICE organizing would go away if the resources went away. And again, I worked on this for 4 hours last night. This was not an intensive research effort. I'm just saying that based on what I'm seeing, I don't know how you can say that this is not a nationally coordinated effort across a wide variety of organizations, to include the 50-51 movement, to include Indivisible, to include the all the No Kings people, to include all these immigrant justice people, to include the ACLU, to include local governments. How is this not a nationally coordinated effort to undermine the operations of ICE? I am one person that figured this out in 4 hours. Has the federal government figured this out? Because they've been allegedly working on this stuff for months. Do you remember when Pam Bondi assured us that they were forming a committee in the Department of Justice to root out all the funding sources? Did I literally just root out the fucking funding? By making a spreadsheet? No, we're not going to do that. I thought about doing that, and people can certainly do it. I don't mind if people do research. I'll even put the link. I'll put the link in the chat. You guys can all view this spreadsheet. There you go. Rumble, you're quiet today. What's going on Rumble? Is the stream working on Rumble? Is anyone on Rumble? No one's in the Rumble chat? What's going on? That's weird. Hey, thanks, average person, for doing the work. I appreciate that. So that's what I wanted to put out there. And again, I don't know the answers to all of this yet. Perhaps we can work together to, I don't know, crowdsource the fuck out of this research. But I want to know who all the partners of these organizations are. I want to know where these phone numbers are being linked from. And I think that this is a really good place where we can start to map out these immigrant rights organizations and all of the people that are supporting all this anti-ICE organizing and all that stuff. I think it's a pretty good place to start. Okay? I think it's a pretty good place to start. I'm rather impressed with myself for figuring this out, if I'm being honest about it. Towards the Info Motherlode collection playbook that Dr. K hunted and gathered. Hey, I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you. So if you guys want to research that, you can click on that spreadsheet. You guys can start researching these organizations if you want. If you do, obviously you can't edit this spreadsheet because I'm not giving you guys that ability. I don't trust you guys that much, if I'm being honest about it. But what you can do is you can make your own spreadsheet. You can use Google Docs to make your own spreadsheet and go start doing some research. And maybe you can even do research as we're talking today and as we are watching something, because we have to multitask because we're the only fucking people who do this shit on the internet. And so we have to multitask across a wide variety of projects at any given point. So do you guys want to know what I found today? Do you guys want to know what I found? Well, I have to change my screen. It turns out that there is a young DSA chapter at Kansas State University. The young DSA is basically it's like Turning Point USA, but for the DSA. The YDSA are basically the college chapters of the DSA, the Democratic Socialists of America. And so, well, you can literally just copy it. You can just copy it. Copy and paste. Learn how to, if you guys can't copy and paste, that's a you problem. That's not a me problem. All right. So the DSA, the Democratic Socialists of America, have these chapters at colleges all over the country called the YDSA. There is, of course, a chapter at Kansas State University. Now, the reason I wanted to show this is not just because this is at a state university, but because, of course, it's in Kansas. And Kansas, the last time I checked, is a red state. Now, I'm sure there's going to be some conservative that's going to come into the chat today and go, Kansas isn't really a red state. They're more of a purple state. And blah, 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 blah. Well, I'm pretty sure that Kansas is a red state. I'm pretty sure. And this is a state university in a red state. And they have a YDSA chapter. And I'll be honest, there's a lot of stuff on this YDSA's chapter's YouTube page that I want to watch. They actually have a whole bunch of stuff. Look, they've got a whole socialist history about queer liberation. We were almost gonna watch that today. They've got a Communist Manifesto reading group. They've got a Paris Commune reading group. They have defending socialism, they've got all sorts of great shit. Look, they even just recently, 2 weeks ago, did Socialist Histories, Queer Socialist Publications, Summer Reading Group. All of this sounds really great, right? Well, the one that I'm most interested in is going to be this one. Liberalism and Fascism, the State of American Politics, with Dr. Gabriel Rockhill. Who is Dr. Gabriel Rockhill? you ask? Born in 1972, was an American philosopher. He is the professor of philosophy at Villanova University and the director of the Critical Theory Workshop. He has written in Counterpunch, which is a socialist publication, Liberation, socialist publication. And, in general, he runs a critical theory workshop, which is like advanced level socialism. Think the Frankfurt School. The Frankfurt School were critical theory. He is actually running a workshop about like having all sorts of like critical theory people come and speak. He has written books about critical theory. Look at this. In addition to his scholarly publications, Rockhill has written a number of essays of political critiques that tie the United States CIA and other Western capitalist nation-state security apparatuses to the anti-communist politics of Western intellectual thought. Sounds charming, doesn't he? Two ladies, thank you so much for the generous super chat. To my family here, I have some bad news. My Aunt Annette passed away last night. I'm very sorry to hear that, two ladies. I will be off for several days, but I will try to stay up to speed, though we have lots of family coming to town. Thank you again for your prayers. I'm really sorry to hear that, two ladies. The heart goes out to you guys and your family. And, it's always sad when something like that happens, but, coming together as a family, it can make things a little bit better. You guys are going to get to share some stories and stuff like that. And remember your Aunt Annette, and, she's in a better place now, and she'll always be with you, and she's looking down on you, and we love you, and we appreciate you. Take care of yourself, take care of your girls. And, we will send our prayers and condolences out to you guys. Very sorry to hear that. So today on the stream, we are going to be watching this lecture. This lecture was not that long. Oh, you guys can't even see the Wikipedia page that I had up. That's what I had up. Anyway, this lecture was on May 30th, 2025. So it was but a couple months ago. It was at Kansas State University. It only has 335 views, which I love to find stuff like this. You guys know I do. Dr. Gabriel Rockhill was invited by the YDSA at Kansas State to present on his latest works. He details his findings archiving the past impression and present of fascism and liberal politics. So I think we're going to get some good old shitting on liberalism in this stream as well. There's going to be shitting on fascism and shitting on liberalism. Two ladies with the 10 gifted channel memberships, bro. You didn't have to do that. We really appreciate that. Thank you, two ladies. That's awesome. Very generous. Congrats to everyone who is getting a channel membership from two ladies. Thank you. Appreciate it very, very much. All right, so that is what we're going to be watching today, guys. As a reminder, if you want to support the work I'm doing and keep me in business, because I am 100% funded by people just like you, head over to the Substack. That is Karlyn, KARLYN.substack.com. Sign up for a membership, $8 a month, $80 a year. You will get all my best stuff over on the Substack. I have a massive archive of resources to help you guys out. Evidence, spy streams, breakdowns of leftist ideology, all sorts of that good stuff. And of course, if you're new to my work, you can just check out the new to my work section. Has some classes, has some resources for getting started if you want to get up to speed real quickly. And of course, this is the primary way I ask people to fund my work, because I don't have any political bosses. I don't shill any political narrative. I don't shill for gambling websites, which, did you guys know that conservative and right-leaning influencers are now being paid to shill for gambling websites? I'm like, bro, I've never understood the philosophy of just taking money to post about a service on Twitter that you don't even like or use and shouldn't really align with your values at all. And all of the posts about the gambling websites were like, this is probably a really bad idea, but if you're into it, maybe you should use this brand. It's like, bro, for real? You will never see me doing that shit. And the reason I never have to shill for companies I don't want to shill for is because you guys fund my work. And so my only job is to show up and tell you the truth. I don't need to shill for anyone. I don't need to follow any political talking points. We go where the evidence takes us. We don't do any, I don't even do ad reads. Okay. I trust that you guys are going to hook me up with Substack memberships and with super chats. And of course, with merchandise sales, where you can head over to the Red Menace Supply Company. That is redmenacesupply.com. Let me get those links in the chat. And for the next For the next about a week or so, you can get all of these awesome McCarthy designs for 25% off, including the coveted "Are You an Anti-Communist" t-shirt that I wore on my last Fox News appearance, and it's got a badass QR code that goes to a website that leads people off to my work, and it looks really cool. And it's an awesome shirt, and it comes in black, and it comes in gold, and it comes in red, and it comes in a lighter color too for Judy, because Judy likes me to do lighter colors, but I like the black one. It looks awesome. I get a lot of compliments on it, and I know a lot of people have asked me about it. You can get that design, everything with that design, for 25% off for the rest of the month, along with all of these other McCarthy is right designs, and that does help fund the work I'm doing and kind of celebrates the fact that we are leading a modern day McCarthyism movement in this country. Yeah, well, there's an anti-Antifa design. Yeah, for sure. For sure. Here is the anti-Antifa design. Boom. There you go, bro. There you go. White, red, and black. Looks cool. And you get to support my work, which is awesome. Average person, Karlyn is a shill to the truth and the truth alone. So real. So real. All right, guys, let's dig into our lecture today. We are watching Liberalism and Fascism, the State of American Politics with Dr. Gabriel Rockhill, and this was at Kansas State University on May 30th, 2025. Let's get this party started.
Hello and welcome.
Oh shit, I have my sound set up. I am a professional, as you guys know. I am a professional streamer on the internet, and I don't have my sound set up correctly. Hang on. Professional streamer here. Okay, take two.
Hi. IDSA, Kansas State University.
Where's the sound? Where'd the sound go?
Hours that our members do, almost spending too much time and not focusing on their homework. But none of this happens without the support from our community. Every campaign, every action, every flyer, every infographic is possible only because of the broader K-State community. By showing up today, signing our petitions, and reposting our infographics,
I gotta pee. I'll be right back. Let me know if I miss anything.
You've already taken a huge step. But now I'm asking for you guys to do one step further. Follow us on Instagram, fill out our interest form, join our meetings. It is a big step right now, I know. But we are not that scary. I know our politics, socialism is a big word for a lot of folks, but we have a friendly faces here, right? We have food at our events, stuff like that. I am asking you guys to join us. I will be honest, we are organizing at a time when the threat of fascism is escalating, not as some fringe movement, but as a reaction to the deep crisis within our political and economic systems. When people lose faith in the systems that only serve the rich, it fosters a groundwork for fascism to breed. That's what makes this moment so urgent. If you don't understand fascism as a product of capitalism in decay, if we treat it as some random glitch—
What? Did I just hear that fascism is capitalism in decay? I came back at exactly the right time. Hang on. Sorry, I need to rewind.
I will be honest, we are organizing at a time when the threat of fascism is escalating, not as some fringe movement, but as a reaction to the deep crisis within our political and economic systems. When people lose faith in the systems that only serve the rich, it fosters a groundwork for fascism.
Oh, hang on. No, you don't need to send that back, but I do need to actually check in to make sure your original one got sent. No. So what happened with Chicken Spawn is they sent him the wrong hoodie. It was just completely the wrong thing. And so, no, you don't have to send that back. They're just supposed to send you another one, and I'll make sure they did, okay?
But as a reaction to the deep friendly faces here, right? We have food at our events, stuff like that. I am asking you guys to join us. I will be honest, we are organizing at a time when the threat of fascism is escalating, not as some fringe movement, but as a reaction to the deep crisis within our political and economic systems. When people lose faith in the systems that only serve the rich, it fosters a groundwork for fascism to breed. That's what makes this moment so urgent. If you don't understand fascism as a product of capitalism in decay, if we treat it as some random glitch that rather than a feature of the failing system, we risk repeating history. That's why I am so grateful to have Dr. Rockhill join us today. As a philosopher, writer, founder of the Critical Theory Workshop, he has helped expose the deep ties between liberalism and fascism, and challenges us to think what
The argument is that liberalism causes fascism. Is that what I just heard? Is that what I just heard? The argument is that liberalism causes fascism. That's fucking hilarious.
Of the Critical Theory Workshop, he has helped expose the deep ties between liberalism and fascism, and challenges us to think what liberation truly looks like. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Rockhill.
Liberalism is literally fascist. Someone tell James Lindsay that immediately.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the warm introduction. It's a real honor for me to be invited to Kansas State University. I've been invited around the world to many prestigious places. I've been in Barcelona, I've been in Buenos Aires, I've been in China, but this is for me the greatest possible honor because I grew up in Kansas on a farm not far from here. And one of my sweetest memories of my life, I'm starting out light because it's going to get dark after this for the discussion. So one of my best memories is I moved to Paris, must have been 25 years ago. I was able to get a scholarship after my undergraduate studies, and I didn't know anyone there. I barely knew the language, but I knew one person who was a friend of a friend with whom I'd worked in construction for about 6 years in rural Kansas, including at the Pony Express station in West Kansas, and a number of other kind of historical sites. And he said, you know, I went to K-State with my good friend, Eric. He lives in Paris, go and meet him. And so I wrote to Eric. Eric said, yeah, just go to this cafe, wear an orange shirt. And I was a bit of a hayseed, but I did have an orange shirt, and I went and I met him, and he picked up this little hayseed from Kansas and got me an apartment, introduced me to wonderful people, set me up, taught me the ropes, taught me how to buy a suit, how to wear a suit. I got cleaned up, got educated. And so I have an eternal debt to Eric, and via Eric, Kansas State University. It's a real honor to be here. And the topic for today is something that I've been working on for quite some time because I think it's integral for all of us to understand what fascism is, where it comes from, and most importantly, how to fight it, and what the fight looks like when you don't just win it in the short term, but when you win it in the long term.
Oh, this is going to be great.
And part of what I'm going to present is
this is going to be
the
great.
Opening section to a book that I've been working on called, and don't be scared of the title, Fascism and the Socialist Solution. The opening...
This guy is working on a book called Fascism and the Socialist Solution. I knew this was gonna be good. I knew it. I can always sense these things. I can sniff this shit out. Oh yeah? Tell us more.
Opening section to a book that I've been working on called, and don't be scared of the title, Fascism and the Socialist Solution. The opening comments are going to be somewhat of a conceptual nature. There was someone here earlier who was joking about me citing Hegel or maybe getting all philosophical. There is a philosophic component, but the reason I want to start with this is because of how strange the concept of fascism is and how it tends to operate to obfuscate the actual material reality of fascism. So the concept of fascism, as it is commonly used within mainstream discourse, functions in the most singular fashion. When the question is raised if such or such phenomenon is fascist, it is considered perfectly natural to compare it to the supposed touchstone of fascism, which is taken to be the form that it took in Italy and especially Germany. Paul Sweezy described the situation as follows, quote, "For a political system to qualify as fascist, it has to display the German or Italian characteristics of fascism. It must be based on a fascist mass movement anchored primarily in paramilitary formations of brown shirts or black shirts. It must be a one-party regime with a party headed by a Führer or some other figure symbolizing the principle of authoritarian leadership. It must be violently nationalist, racist, anti-Semitic.
Violently
It must be frankly
nationalist.
illiberal, intolerant of opposition, hostile to civil liberties and human rights." This is quite obviously.
Wait, does that sound like just actually awesome to anyone else? Hang on, let's just listen. Can we just listen to the list of characteristics again? Because unironically, what he just described actually sounds pretty effing great to me.
Paul Sweezy described the situation as follows, quote, "For a political system to qualify as fascist, it has to display the German or Italian characteristics of fascism. It must be based on a fascist mass movement anchored primarily in paramilitary formations of brown shirts or black shirts. It must be a one-party regime with a party headed by a Führer or some other figure symbolizing the principle of authoritarian leadership. It must be violently nationalist, racist, anti-Semitic. It must be frankly illiberal, intolerant of opposition, hostile to civil liberties and human rights." This is quite obviously the standard yardstick.
That all sounds like, one in the chat if that sounds based and amazing, 2 in the chat if you think all that sounds like a horrible idea. 1 in the chat for based and amazing. 2 in the chat for horrible idea. That's a lot of ones. Yeah, that sounds, just saying, like, they're making it seem really, really, really appealing to me. I'm on board with, like, literally all of those things. I'm okay with that. Not a single 2 in the chat.
So we ask questions like, well, are there swastikas, goose steps, and Nazi salutes? There are Nazi salutes, by the way, but this ends up being the qualifying attribute of whether or not something counts as fascism. There are more or less extreme versions of this approach. Some of them focus specifically on Nazism as the ideal type of fascism, whereas others concentrate slightly more generally on a classical model of fascism found in Italy as well as Germany. The essential conceptual move, though, is identical. It is the particular historical manifestation of fascism that is supposed to define the general and not the other way around. A specific manifestation of fascism is assumed to serve as the touchstone for judging whether or not fascism exists in a particular instance. Now, we should take a moment to register how strange this is, because other political concepts don't function in this manner. It becomes readily apparent if one thinks, for instance, of a category like revolution. Would it be appropriate to draw the conclusion that an uprising is a revolution if and only if the same fundamental pattern it follows is that of the French Revolution, for instance? Should one specific revolution serve as the touchstone for all revolutions? The absurdity of such a proposition becomes obvious if you consider a widely used political concept like that of a state. Should we restrict our use of the term only to those situations that resemble a particular state, such as the United States? What about the category of dictatorship? Can the concept of colonialism refer only to the model of French colonialism in Africa? Now, a likely criticism of this line of argumentation, or what's implicit in what I just said, is that the concept of fascism emerged in Italy to describe a novel form of politics, and it therefore makes sense to consider it as the prototypical exemplar of fascism. It is certainly true that this is where the concept emerged, but it is highly significant, as Benito Mussolini himself regularly insisted, that it first appeared as an inchoate, disorganized movement that was only later and awkwardly conceptualized. Fascism in Italy was an evolving project that changed very significantly over time. The practice was primary and its conceptualization followed in turn, meaning that there was not a predefined idea of fascism that determined the practice, but rather a shifting series of activities that were later conceptualized as fascism. When the term emerged, it was strongly affiliated with Italy, to such an extent, in fact, that the Nazis themselves often referred to the fascists as people distinct from themselves, meaning the people in Italy. By contrast, the Nazis called themselves National Socialists, abusing the term socialist, by the way, which we could come back to in the Q&A.
The actual socialists are like, the Nazis weren't real socialists. They were just abusing the term socialist. The classical liberals are like, do you know who the real socialists are? The Nazis. It's so funny. It's so funny. No one listens to each other.
Often referred to the fascists as people distinct from themselves, meaning the people in Italy. By contrast, the Nazis called themselves National Socialists, abusing the term socialist, by the way, which we could come back to in the Q&A. In 1934, Joseph Goebbels wrote in Fascism and Its Practical Results, quote, Mussolini stands at the beginning and at the end of the political development that we call fascism. Fascism is a phenomenon that entered the world of phenomena for the first time with Mussolini. Fascism received from Mussolini not only the idea, but also the shape and organization. Fascism in this sense, let's end quote, fascism in this sense was understood as a proper name. It stood for the unique form of politics implemented in Italy under Mussolini. In Mein Kampf, Hitler also used the term fascism in this manner to refer to political developments in Italy. But at the same time, Italian fascism clearly exercised an important influence over German National Socialism. And Goebbels recognized this. He described this in terms of a confluence between them insofar as they're both driving in the same direction. Quote, I'm firmly convinced that the political direction that we today call fascism in Italy, and which we call in Germany National Socialism, will gradually penetrate the whole of Europe. That there can no longer be any inhibition or obstacle to it, and that the future of our continent depends on the breakthrough of this political phenomenon, end quote. He is here identifying a common practice behind two different national movements affiliated with the concepts of Nazism and fascism at the time. It is this common practice that would be conceptually identified with the term fascism. Rather than simply functioning as a proper name, tethered to the specific type of rule in Italy under Mussolini, the term was given its conceptual birthright by being elevated to the...
I just want to be clear because I saw some confused people both in the chat on YouTube and on Rumble. The Nazis were not socialists. The Nazis have nothing in common with socialists. They're not the same thing. If you believe the conservative talking point that the Nazis were the real socialists, you have learned nothing from me. Socialists want to abolish private property. The Nazis did not want to abolish private property. That's all that matters. They're really not the same thing. I'm very sorry so many conservative influencers have lied to their audience. And I'm not defending Nazis. I'm not saying Nazis are the worst thing ever. Obviously, Hitler is the worst person that ever lived. I'm just saying no. Words matter. No. One wants to abolish private property, which is the defining characteristic of their ideology, and one does not.
Status of a genus with multiple species, right? National Socialism and Italian fascism being species of the genus fascism. In this regard, it is important to note that at the same time, there was a clear identification of movements around, or I should say across the capitalist world, that were recognized as fascist in this sense, including very importantly, if you look at the mainstream press in the United States in the 1930s, the Ku Klux Klan, which was identified as being an American version of fascism. So even though the term fascism was minted in Italy and it originally functioned as a proper name to refer to this unique phenomenon, it became a concept by being recognized as a more general category that could be applied to other instances. In the 1930s, the communist movement widely used the concept of fascism to refer not only to Italy and Germany, but also to similar reactionary political movements across the entire capitalist world. There were fascist movements in every capitalist country in the wake of the Great Depression. Figures like Antonio Gramsci, Togliatti, Dutt, and many others used the concept in this sense. Nazism, by contrast, largely remained a proper name, used to index the specific form of fascism in Germany and those who identified directly with it, including, of course, after the war. In other words, fascism was broadly recognized as the genus of which Nazism and Italian fascism were but species. With all of this in mind, we can now return to the common sense understanding of fascism in the contemporary world. What is remarkable is that at least when the term is invoked to discuss developments in the capitalist world, the category of fascism is often deprived of its conceptual power of generalization because it is collapsed into a particular instantiation thereof. Such particularization renders the concept ineffective, since, at least in extreme cases, it simply becomes a matter of studying how a specific phenomenon measures up to a particular ideal type of fascism. Rather than Nazism and Italian fascism being recognized as specific manifestations of a more general phenomenon, fascism, they become the universal form by which all potential forms of fascism are judged. The relationship between the particular and the universal is thereby inverted. Rather than the particular being subsumed under the universal, it is the general that is subservient to the specific. So the very idea of fascism is deprived of one of the major features of concepts in general, their ability to concretely abstract from empirical particulars to identify patterns at a higher level of generality. Without this power of concrete abstraction, a concept is reduced to little more than an empirical description of one particular phenomenon. It's quite literally deconceptualized. It has no power as a concept. It instead comes to function more like a proper name that indexes a singular reality. Instead of fascism functioning like other political concepts, by identifying general patterns, it comes to function more like a proper name organically linked to one particular social phenomenon. Right? To simplify this, it would be, well, somebody's a Nazi because they give a Nazi salute, or somebody's a fascist because they have a swastika tattooed on them, but you couldn't recognize someone as a fascist if they do not have those particular attributes. The conceptual reduction of fascism to the proper name of a particular is also visible in one of the other tendencies within the mainstream conceptualization of fascism.
Okay.
If it is invoked to refer
Let me explain what he's doing. The left's definition of fascism is that you are a capitalist. The left's definition of fascism is that you are not a socialist or communist. Anything that is not socialism or communism is considered to be fascist, to include liberalism, to include the Democratic Party. They do not believe the Democratic Party is socialist and communist. And so what he's saying is that we cannot define fascism based on the Nazis. We cannot define fascism based on Mussolini. We have to define fascism as something more broad. Because if we pigeonhole ourselves into these things, it's not just about someone having a swastika tattoo. It's about someone who supports such and such and such a system. Okay? That's what he's trying to do. Because they're trying to expand the definition of fascism to include anyone who is not on the radical far left. And if you don't support their ideology, you are a fascist. So it's like they're saying, we can't just say that you have to be a Nazi to be a fascist. We have to think a little bit more broadly.
To developments in the capitalist world, above and beyond the Nazi fascist exemplar, it is most often used as a form of moral or political condemnation of an individual, such as Trump, Orban, Musk, Bolsonaro, rather than as a critique of the system that produces such individuals. A single person is thereby judged to be fascist, usually based on the Hitler-Mussolini model, but this again singularizes the concept of fascism, depriving it of its power of generalization and its ability to describe a system of governance within which individuals operate. The overall ideological effect of the particularization of the concept of fascism, which destroys its power of generalization by reducing it to a proper name, is to impose the idea that fascism is a singular aberration within the capitalist world. If this unique
He's going there. I told you. Did I tell you that's not what he was doing? He's going there. He's like, if we just define fascism as Mussolini or the Nazis, then we're defining fascism as a singular aberration within the capitalist world. Do you guys see? He's saying we're pigeonholing ourselves to this one specific concept within the capitalist world, and he literally used that language. And he said, no, we don't want to be pigeonholed into one singular aberration. We need to encompass the entire capitalist world. Listen again.
If it is invoked to refer to developments in the capitalist world above and beyond the Nazi fascist exemplar, it is most often used as a form of moral or political condemnation of an individual, such as Trump, Orban, Musk, Bolsonaro, rather than as a critique of the system that produces such individuals.
There it is. There it is. I missed that the first time. I'm so glad we listened to that again. He literally just said fascism is the system that produces individuals like Trump or Orban or any of these other people that they don't like. Does everyone understand what we just listened to? Hey, listen, Colleen, I understand that you have feelings about this stuff, but I've noticed this across several different streams with you. You're not engaging with what's being said. You're complaining about it. It's not useful. It's not useful in the chat. It's not useful to you learning. You have to take what they're saying at face value and not complaining about why they're saying it. Because of the constant complaints about why they're saying it or they're not being taught real history in school, it doesn't fucking matter. If you want to learn this stuff, you need to put that aside and actually just pay attention to what they're saying, because right now you're not learning, and I know that. I can tell. So listen again. For him, fascism is not about the Nazis. Fascism is not about Mussolini. Fascism is a system. The only thing that matters is how the left defines it. So that is what matters. He's talking about the system of capitalism that has produced people like Elon Musk and Trump and et cetera, et cetera. No. Why is no one fucking listening to me today? No, they are not expanding the definitions. They are framing it into their worldview. They literally are. They literally are, though. So if you don't care about their definition, you don't belong here. Full stop. Because that's all we care about. Is everyone ready to listen? Or does anyone else want to file a complaint in the chat? Does anyone else want to file a fucking grievance with the manager because you don't like their definitions? Okay, listen.
The fascists because they have a swastika tattooed on them, but you couldn't recognize someone as a fascist if they do not have those particular attributes. The conceptual reduction of fascism to the proper name of a particular is also visible in one of the other tendencies within the mainstream conceptualization of fascism. If it is invoked to refer to developments in the capitalist world above and beyond the Nazi fascist exemplar, it is most often used as a form of moral or political condemnation of an individual, such as Trump, Orban, Musk, Bolsonaro.
Okay, I want to point something out. He's saying people are using the word fascism to insult individuals they don't like Trump, Orban, Musk, Bolsonaro. He's about to be critical of this, okay? I want people to understand this. He's saying some of you call people that you don't like a fascist as an insult. And then he's going to say, what you should instead be doing is critiquing the system that created these individuals in the first place. And of course, what he's saying when he's saying you should be critiquing the system that created them is the system of capitalism that created Trump and Orban and Musk and Bolsonaro and everyone else they don't like. So what he's saying is this shouldn't be about using the word fascist as an individual insult against these people. Our complaint is with the system. Our complaint is with the system that created this reality to begin with, because that's the system they're trying to overthrow. Does everyone understand? We're going to listen to it, and I want you to actually everyone really tune in and listen to what he's saying.
Of fascism to the proper name of a particular is also visible in one of the other tendencies within the mainstream conceptualization of fascism. If it is invoked to refer to developments in the capitalist world above and beyond the Nazi fascist exemplar, it is most often used as a form of moral or political condemnation of an individual, such as Trump, Orban, Musk, Bolsonaro, rather than as a critique of the system that produces such individuals.
Boom.
A single person is thereby judged to be fascist, usually based on the Hitler-Mussolini model, but this again singularizes the concept of fascism derived.
When we define fascism based on just Hitler or Mussolini, we are singularizing it down to the individual. Whereas what we should be doing is expanding it to include the system that created the individuals, the capitalist system that created the individuals. Remember, socialists and communists do not see things individually. This is why whiteness is not about skin color. If whiteness was about skin color, that would be individual. When they're talking about whiteness, white supremacy, they're talking about systemic racism, which is the system that upholds racism. Systemic racism, the system that upholds racism. That means capitalism. In the same way, they're saying we shouldn't be focusing on these individual fascist leaders. We should be focusing on the collective system that created this in the first place. I don't give a fuck. I'm gonna put a pin in this right now. I don't want to see any more of this bullshit in the chat. We don't really have capitalism because of reason X, Y. I don't give a fuck. That is not the point. That has nothing to do with what we're talking about. Do not ever say this shit in my chat again. You don't even know their definition of capitalism. Your job is to shut the fuck up and listen. I am so sick of every single time we do something about this. We have people come into the chat. Well, you know, we haven't had capitalism in a really long time, and all these no one gives a fuck about your libertarian pontifications. We are trying to learn what the left thinks. We don't care what you think. We want to know what they think. Yes, exactly.
Than as a critique of the system that produces such individuals. A single person is thereby judged to be fascist, usually based on the Hitler-Mussolini model, but this again singularizes the concept of fascism, depriving it of its power of generalization and its ability to describe a system of governance within which individuals operate. The overall ideological effect of the particularization of the concept of fascism, which destroys its power of generalization by reducing it to a proper name, is to impose the idea that fascism is a singular aberration within the capitalist world. If this unique phenomenon reappears, it primarily rears its evil head in individuals, not the system that produced them.
Boom.
Once again promoting the assumption that fascism is an exceptional development. The next section of my talk is totalitarianism.
Okay, before we go to totalitarianism, does everyone understand what he just said? His entire what the fuck Colleen, what did I tell you less than 10 minutes ago? I need you to repeat back to me what I told you less than 10 minutes ago in the chat right now. Go. What did I tell you less than 10 minutes ago? I stopped the entire stream to give you an instruction. You are in my classroom. I am giving you an instruction in my classroom. I don't care about your thoughts or opinions about my instruction. What did I tell you less than 10 minutes ago? In the chat right now, go. If you don't put it in the chat in the next 30 seconds, I'm banning you for the rest of the day. No more talking for the rest of the day. You are going to answer this fucking question. What did I just tell you less than 10 minutes ago? You have 20 seconds, Colleen. What did I tell you less than 10 minutes ago? This should not be this hard. It was less than 10 minutes ago. If you were listening, this would be an easy answer. You have 10 seconds. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. No, that's not what I asked you. I asked you to repeat what I told you 10 minutes ago. You are not listening when you are not following my instructions. I asked you to repeat what I told you less than 10 minutes ago. Do you want to give it another try? Otherwise, I'm putting you in a timeout for the rest of the stream and there will be no more talking. What did I tell you less than 10 minutes ago? Answer the question. I'm not looking for I'm sorry. I'm looking for some sort of indication that you were actually listening to what I told you 10 minutes ago. Do not, no. Okay, now you're permanently banned. Go away. Goodbye. What did I tell you less than 10 minutes ago? 30 seconds. Last chance, because I'm not holding up the stream anymore. You do this every single stream you're in. Don't think I don't notice because I don't call it out every time. You do this every single stream you're in the chat. I notice everyone that comes in the chat on a regular basis. I know what they're doing. No, okay. Time out for the rest of the stream. Time out for the rest of the stream. You didn't answer the question I asked, which means you are not listening. Time out for 24 hours. Hopefully you can find your way to listening in the next 24 hours because you ain't going to be talking. And if you come back into my chat tomorrow and you still continue to not listen, I will put you in a timeout again. Now, back to this, now that we have quieted people in the chat who are not fucking listening. I need everyone to understand what he's saying. Their definition of fascism is the system that creates who they call the fascist, which is anyone that is not a far-left socialist or communist and engages in private property ownership, which is the definition of capitalism. The left's definition of capitalism is private property ownership. They want to abolish all private property ownership to include your ability to own a home, your ability to own land, your ability to own an apartment rental that you rent out as a landlord, your ability to own intellectual property, your ability to own a business, whether or not that business is big or small, and parental rights over your kids are considered to be a form of private property because it allows for the passing of generational wealth from parent to child, which keeps it privatized within the nuclear family and out of the reach of the collective. That is the only definition of capitalism that matters. No, he didn't say that. No, and so far as we care, they're the same thing. Insofar as we care, they are the same definition. So, this person is defining fascism as the capitalist system that produces all the people that he doesn't like that are outside of a far left belief system. That is their definition. He said it over and over and over again in this. We're going to listen to it one more time all the way through. I need people to understand this before we move forward.
Someone is a fascist if they do not have those particular attributes. The conceptual reduction of fascism to the proper name of a particular is also visible in one of the other tendencies within the mainstream conceptualization of fascism. If it is invoked to refer to developments in the capitalist world above and beyond the Nazi fascist exemplar, it is most often used as a form of moral or political condemnation of an individual, such as Trump, Orban, Musk, Bolsonaro, rather than as a critique of the system that produces such individuals. A single person is thereby judged to be fascist, usually based on the Hitler-Mussolini model, but this again singularizes the concept of fascism, depriving it of its power of generalization and its ability to describe a system of governance within which individuals operate. The overall ideological effect of the particularization of the concept of fascism, which destroys its power of generalization by reducing it to a proper name, is to impose the idea that fascism is a singular aberration within the capitalist world. If this unique phenomenon reappears, it primarily rears its evil head in individuals, not the system that produced them, once again promoting the assumption that fascism is an exceptional development. The next section of my talk is totalitarianism.
Did everyone hear him say that? One in the chat, if you heard him say that fascism is a collective is the capitalist system. Two in the chat if you're still confused. Please be honest. I will not be mad if you're honest. I will be mad if you lie and then ask questions later that shows me you weren't honest. Everyone heard that? Okay. It's very, very important that you understand this very specific definition. If you are putting two in the chat, I need you to formulate a question to tell me where you are confused. I saw 1, 2 in the chat, so I'm now expecting the person who put a 2 in the chat to formulate a question to tell me specifically where they are confused. Seeker, I'm seeing 1.5 from you, so that's actually a 2, so I need you to now formulate a question to tell me how you are confused. Yes, this is a good point. H. Tom is saying that fascism is he's saying that fascism is an inherent part of capitalism. It is not just an exceptional case. It is an inherent part of fascism. Do they think there is value in tracing historical? No, they don't. No, they don't. Their definition, this is what you need to understand. Their definitions have always been the same. I wrote a book called A Brief History of Racism. It tracked the definition of racism from the time the term was created until today. It is the same. Their definitions have always been the same. You don't understand their definitions, and that is why you think they have changed. Your lack of understanding of what they're talking about is like reflected in the fact that you don't understand. It's your just lack of understanding about what their definitions are. But their definitions have always been their definitions. And if you don't believe me, pick up my book, A Brief History of Racism, because I lay that out clearly from 1902 until today with the definition of racism, which the left has always defined in the same way. Hang on. He mentioned fascism as an exceptional, so he's saying it's a natural product of capitalism. Exactly. He's saying the capitalist system is fascism. Private property ownership is fascism. That's what they're saying. The system of capitalism creates the fascist leaders. The system of capitalism is therefore fascism.
Or the ubiquitous affiliation between fascism and communism. I didn't realize that the color was appropriate, so, but I'm glad I brought that water bottle. So the ideology of fascist exceptionalism, that's what I've been describing. The ideology of fascist exceptionalism primarily applies to the capitalist world, and more specifically to the imperialist countries. And
could he be more specific?
But I'm glad I brought that water bottle. So the ideology of fascist exceptionalism, that's what I've been describing. The ideology of fascist exceptionalism primarily applies to the capitalist world, and more specifically to the imperialist countries and their allies, the leading capitalist powers, Western Europe and the United States. It implicitly suggests that the abhorrent violence of fascism only manifests itself in the imperialist world order in the rarest of instances, and perhaps only once in history, or only through the nefarious effects of diabolical individuals. Capitalist societies involved in imperialism are thereby depicted as structurally devoid of fascism, at least for the most part, and the latter is presented as a rare disease that has only infected a few aberrant societies or individuals. The ideology of fascist exceptionalism thereby goes hand in hand with the assumption that fascism is an irregularity within the capitalist world and a radical departure from its normal function. By contrast, there has been a powerful ideological effort to use the concept of fascism in the opposite sense when it comes to socialist countries, generalizing it to the utmost as a characteristic of most, if not all, societies that have sought to liberate themselves from capitalism.
Again, they're talking about liberating yourself from capitalism literally means communism. That's what that means. This is fascism versus communism. Everything that is not communist, everything that is not liberated from capitalism is fascist. If, according to the speaker, fascism and capitalism is centered around private property, why do they need both words? Because that's... How the fuck long have you been watching my content? You've been watching my content a long time. You don't know the answer to this? Answer your own question in the chat right now. I'm not, just so people know, he's not a new person. He's been hanging around my channel for a long ass time. Hang on. Channel activity. Yeah, you've got a whole long channel history. So answer your own question. You don't know the answer to this question? Answer your own question. What the fuck have you been doing? You've been listening to my channel for there is a chat history of you on my channel going back over 200 episodes. You have been listening to my channel for over a year. Answer your own question. We're waiting. You have 30 seconds to answer your own question. What the fuck have you been doing? Why have you been hanging around if you're not listening? Can someone in the chat please answer the question? The question is, if they really mean private property when they say capitalism, then why do they have two different words? Does anyone else want to try to answer the question that has actually been paying attention for the last 200 episodes? Do you guys want to know why I stop and I yell at people to fucking listen? Because I get people who have literally been watching me for over a year that don't know basic 101 level information. They have a million words for capitalism. They're attacking it from every possible angle. What are some other possible answers to this? Do you think those are the only two words they have for capitalism? Oh, no, no, no. Oh, no, no, no. It's attack on capitalism from multiple different angles. It's like Eskimos and the word snow. Private property ownership means taking away the collective access to resources. True. No, this is not the correct answer. Capitalism is everything that oppresses them. Capitalism is more than an economic system. Yup, true. That's going to have to be good enough for today. Herb, I recommend that you stop talking and you start listening, because obviously you've been talking a lot in my chat because I recognize your screen name. You obviously need to start doing some listening. This is their language and they know what they mean by their definitions. They can have different words to point to different aspects of capitalism.
The master concept that has played a major role in these ideological endeavors is that of totalitarianism. This concept was originally used by communists to describe the totalitarian control of workers' lives under capitalism. However, in the post-war era, figures like Zbigniew Brzezinski and Hannah Arendt attempted to redefine totalitarianism as a general conceptual category that applied equally to fascism and communism. This was part of a larger psychological warfare campaign on the part of imperialist states to redefine fascism in such a way that it was seen to be a feature of communist societies. Brzezinski and Arendt had ties to the US national security state and the national security state of the United Kingdom.
Brzezinski is Mika Brzezinski's
to some
father.
degree in academically laundering state-driven propaganda. Here we arrive then at the central paradox of the common sense use of the concept of fascism. Whereas it is treated as a singular aberration within the capitalist world, it is judged to be ubiquitous
Hang on. When someone has been watching my show for over 200 episodes and they have not learned a single fucking thing, they're not learning. They're not learning. This is a classroom. If you come into a classroom for over a year and you don't know basic 101 level information, you are not learning. This is why I beg and plead with you guys to listen to what is being said, to utilize the resources I've given you. This is why I explain the same thing over and 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 over again, to the point where it drives me insane to have to explain this. Capitalism is defined as private property ownership. That means it's your ability to own a home, your ability to own land, your ability to own an apartment rental, you rent out as a landlord, your ability to own intellectual property, your ability to own a private business, whether that private business is big or small. It also means parental rights over your kids, because that allows for the passing of private property from parent to child, thus keeping it in the private and out of the reach of the collective. I say that every single fucking day. So I don't want to hear that someone who has watched over 200 episodes is just still learning basic 101 level information, because he has heard me say that dozens of times at a minimum. And at that point, if you're not getting it, then you're wasting my time and you're wasting my energy and you're not appreciating all of the free resources that I put together. So I find that to be personally fucking offensive. Either you take this seriously or you do not. No fucking excuses.
Or even a constitutive feature of the communist or socialist world. It is singularized to such an extent that it all but disappears under capitalism, whereas it is generalized to such an extent under communism that some major Western analysts, like Theodor Adorno and Max Horkheimer of the Frankfurt School, have claimed that fascism and communism are simply the same thing. Slavoj Žižek has recently continued this trend by drawing on the dubious scholarship of the eugenicist A. James Gregor to assert that post-Deng China is a variant of contemporary fascism. This process of conceptual overgeneralization not only applies to communist countries, but it also includes nearly any strong state that resists imperialism. To take but a few examples, political figures like Saddam Hussein, Omar Gaddafi, and Bashar al-Assad have regularly been compared to Hitler, thereby suggesting that they were the leaders of modern-day Nazi states. I've never encountered a mainstream discourse that applies the ideology of fascist exceptionalism to countries like Iraq, Libya, and Syria, meaning a discourse that cried foul and claimed that the comparison is absolutely illegitimate because the fundamental features of the Third Reich were not present. There weren't swastikas, Nazi salutes, etc. The same is very much true of the condemnation of communism as fascism. Have the ideologues of empire ever held their analysis of communist countries up to the same standard as capitalist countries, when it's a matter of comparing them to the touchstone of Nazism and fascism? And have any of them claimed, for instance, that Poland and Czechoslovakia did not share essential characteristics, or that more generally, their anti-colonial, anti-capitalist internationalism inexorably separated them from the colonial capitalist ultranationalism of fascism? We see here, and this is my basic point, if I lost you.
I hope everyone is noticing. I'm not going to pause it every time he does this because we've already beaten this dead horse. But I hope everyone is noticing that he keeps defining fascism as the capitalist system over and over and over again. He's done it at least 4 or 5 times since he moved into the totalitarian side. He keeps saying fascism is a manifestation of the capitalist system. Fascism is a manifestation of the capitalist system. Fascism is a manifestation of the like he's saying it repeatedly. And I really hope that people are listening and they're putting the language together and they're understanding that he's saying the same thing over and over and over and over and over again. Thank you, Cynthia. Cynthia shows up like a hero, diving in to save the day with some free channel memberships. Thank you, Cynthia, for gifting those channel memberships. I really appreciate it.
At any point in what I just outlined, that the mainstream dominant concept of fascism is radically lacking in analytic rigor and in the power of conceptual generalization. The next section, which is very short, is fascism and imperialism. Here we arrive then
Fuck
at
you,
the heart of
Trendlin.
matters. The ideology of fascist exceptionalism seeks to render fascism a complete anomaly in the imperialist world order,
Hey,
thereby conceptually
Trendlin, FYI, don't think I've forgotten about that plane ticket that I need to buy. I'm just letting you know. I haven't forgotten about that.
severing fascism from imperialism. The ideology of fascist overgeneralization aims at making fascism ubiquitous in the regions of the world that resist imperialism, the most significant of which are the countries that are building an anti-imperialist socialist world order.
Oh, yeah?
The bourgeois ideology of fascism thereby turns the world completely upside down, making fascism into a characteristic of anti-imperialist resistance rather than a fundamental feature of imperialism. This ideological inversion goes a long way to explaining how the dominant concept of fascism functions as a term of condemnation. The fascists are those to be morally condemned for resisting the global order of the so-called free world, meaning imperialism. They are, in short, our enemies. This bourgeois ideology of fascism was cemented into the bedrock of US American ideology.
The bourgeois ideology of fascism. Bourgeois, of course, means capitalist for people who don't know. And he's about to say it's American. The bourgeois ideology of fascism is American.
The global order of the so-called free world, meaning imperialism. They are, in short, our enemies. This bourgeois ideology of fascism was cemented into the bedrock of US American ideology through the myth of the good war.
Yes.
It is to this foundational ideological historical narrative that I'd now like to turn.
Okay.
So this is the title of the next section.
Oh, good.
So the United States emerged from the Second World War as the undisputed leader of the capitalist and imperialist camp.
Okay, the United States is the leader of capitalism nationwide. I just want to remind people, and the title of his talk may have new meaning now. Welcome to Liberalism and Fascism, the State of American Politics. We now know a couple things that we didn't know before this presentation. We now know that he is explicitly saying that liberalism leads to fascism. We now know that his explicit definition of fascism is capitalism, the system of capitalism. And now he has just told us America is the leader of capitalism and imperialism in the world. And by the way, imperialism, for people who don't know, Lenin's definition of imperialism is the highest form of capitalism. Okay? Because imperialism is about basically colonizing all of the countries. It's about taking over land, claiming private property as your own. That's what imperialism is on a very large scale. So the title of this talk might as well be America is Fascist. Does everyone understand? The title of this talk may as well be The United States is a Fascist Empire. 1 in the chat if you understand that, 2 in the chat if it's still confusing. Because, like, if you just took the title on face value, you might think that he's saying one side is liberal and the other side is fascist. And you might think he's saying the Democrats are the good liberals and the conservatives are the bad fascists. But that's not what he's saying at all. He's saying that liberalism creates fascism, liberalism inevitably enables fascism, and the United States are the biggest fascists of all. This is how you get to calls to overthrow the government. Because the left believes that if you are overthrowing the United States government, you are overthrowing a fascist government. They believe that the United States is fascist. The United States as we currently have it is fascist. The American dream is fascist. The entire system is fascist. The Constitution is fascist. When they're calling to overthrow the government, they're calling to overthrow the fascist empire. Yes, this is why they say America with a KKK in it. They actually use that in their writings. This justifies the overthrowing. They're defeating the fascists.
For resisting the global order of the so-called free world, meaning imperialism. They are, in short, our enemies. This bourgeois ideology of fascism was cemented into the bedrock of US American ideology through the myth of the good war. It is to this foundational ideological historical narrative that I'd now like to turn. So this is the title of the next section. So the United States emerged from the Second World War as the undisputed leader of the capitalist and imperialist camp. The former imperialist powers of Western Europe had been destroyed by the war. Its founding legend has been insightfully diagnosed by historian Jacques Pauwels in a book entitled The Myth of the Good War. There are a number of facets to this mythology, but the core belief is that the United States is an anti-fascist defender of democracy and freedom, whose mission is to support the so-called free world. It thereby arrived as a leader on the world stage under the banner of the defeat of fascism. Its culture industries, which are the most powerful in the world, have put all of their ample resources into spreading this message far and wide in an attempt to guarantee that the United States took the helm of global imperialism under the guise of being the greatest defender of democracy that the world has ever seen.
Okay, so what he's saying is that America basically branded itself as the great defender of democracy, the anti-fascist, when we defeated Hitler in Germany in World War II. And he's calling this the good war because it positioned America as being the leaders of the free world, okay? He's calling this a myth, though, because what he's saying is America didn't defeat the fascists. America are the fascist. Do you understand? Yeah, I don't know what your property taxes have to do with literally any of this. And if you're making some comment of, we don't know, capitalism is not real, blah, 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 I don't give a fuck. Put your feelings aside. No one cares. He's saying that that it was a myth that America defeated fascism because America is the fascist empire.
Europe had been destroyed by the war. Its founding legend has been insightfully diagnosed by historian Jacques Pauwels in a book entitled The Myth of the Good War. There are a number of facets to this mythology, but the core belief is that the United States is an anti-fascist defender of democracy and freedom, whose mission is to support the so-called free world. It thereby arrived as a leader on the world stage under the banner of the defeat of fascism. Its culture industries, which are the most powerful in the world, have put all of their ample resources into spreading this message far and wide in an attempt to guarantee that the United States took the helm of global imperialism under the guise of being the greatest defender of democracy that the world has ever seen. The ideology of fascist exceptionalism within the imperialist world order was integral to the myth of the good war. By cementing the idea that fascism is an anomaly within the imperialist world, and that it was defeated by the fearless guardian of democracy, it established a bedrock narrative, according to which the world order overseen by the United States was founded on the defeat of fascism and the victory of democracy. This is one of the reasons why there has been a very strong tendency within mainstream discourse to resist the use of the category of fascism when analyzing the imperialist order governed by the United States. It couldn't possibly be fascist because the United States became the leading world power through its world historical defeat of fascism. The ideology of fascist overgeneralization, which applies the category indiscriminately to communist countries as well as other nations that resist imperialism, has allowed the United States to further develop its founding narrative in terms of an ongoing fight against fascism. The Nazi designs of an evil empire were quickly followed by the Soviets and now the Chinese, according to the dominant narrative. The message is clear. Fascism exists in
They're saying that that we basically keep changing the target. So we became the defenders of the free world when we defeated the Nazis, but that was a myth. So we became the defenders of the free world when we were battling the USSR, but that was a myth. And now we're moving on to China. We became the defenders of the free world when we are battling China, but that was a myth. He's saying that these are all myth-making devices in order to position America as like the chief fascist of the world.
the world, it is to be located in the anti-imperialist movements, particularly those that pose the greatest threat because they have a universal and international project of anti-imperialist liberation. In this sense, the myth of the Good War is the founding legend that consolidated both the ideology of fascist exceptionalism within the imperialist world and the ideology of its ubiquitous presence in the anti-imperialist world. Now, to be sure, the United States entered the war, World War II, on the side of the Soviets and contributed to the defeat of the Nazis. Some 400,000 US soldiers gave their lives fighting Nazism and fascism, making decisive contributions in Western Europe and Japan. If we were to use the vocabulary of Antonio Gramsci, we might say that there is a kernel of good sense, meaning a grain of truth, within the common sense narrative regarding the United States anti-fascist orientation. However, this needs to be very seriously contextualized. The overwhelming majority of the Second World War was fought in the East, with some 27 million Soviets and 20 million Chinese giving their lives in the fight against fascism. They were the ones who deserved the greatest credit for defeating it, and many of them were self-declared communists. The United States entered the war very late and in an opportunist manner, with an eye to the spoils of war after it was clear that the Soviets were routing the Nazis.
Wow.
Moreover, it had not at all resisted the rise of fascism in spite of innumerable opportunities, such as during the Spanish Civil War, or when Stalin beseeched.
The United States only entered World War II because they thought that the Soviets were kicking the Nazis' ass, and they were opportunists to take advantage of the situation so they could come out as the big heroes on top to be the leaders of the capitalist world. You heard that, right? He literally said the only reason that we entered World War II is because the Soviets were already kicking Germany's ass, and we saw an opportunity to become the leaders of the free world. As a professional workforce trainer instructor, I admire your classroom control, verbal erasers flying everywhere. Yeah, I was a corporate trainer, so I understand how to. Yeah, you have to be more aggressive on the internet than you can be in a corporate environment. Like, I was much nicer as a corporate trainer, but like on the internet, you can't. You have to yell at people. People do not understand anything other than yelling and shaming and bullying. And I will yell and shame and bully people until they either get on board or they fucking leave. I have an open air classroom here. I need people to know that what is the expectation of being here. And if you're just going to fuck around, or you're going to ask questions to own the libs, or you're going to say something fucking stupid, it's like, no, you have to be shamed and bullied until you actually either get on board or you get the fuck out. I appreciate that, though.
US American leaders on numerous occasions to enter into an anti-fascist alliance. The US national security state also began cozying up to Nazi and fascist elements before the official end of hostilities. This is very well documented through internal documents that are available through Freedom of Information Act requests and in various archives that I've consulted. After the war, the United States established a veritable fascist international, integrating, and I know this might sound surprising to some of you, but it's extremely well documented. I have a number of articles on it with myriad references, many of them archival, but there's also a lot of great historical scholarship. The United States integrated tens of thousands of fascists, these are from Italy and from Germany, into its ranks, and many thousands more in a global empire.
So true, they
In doing
did.
so, the United States did not publicly declare itself to be the Fourth Reich. On the contrary, it has done everything in its power to maintain the narrative according to which it is the greatest defender of freedom and democracy. Its mobilization of fascist forces around the world has therefore been done under the cover of liberalism, as if it were spreading freedom and democracy. In order to break, then.
There it is. There it is. There it is. The United States pretended to be the bastion of freedom by covering itself with liberal ideology when in fact it was spreading fascism. But it was using the liberalism to cover up the fact that it was spreading the fact. This fucking lecture is great. Listen.
The United States did not publicly declare itself to be the Fourth Reich. On the contrary, it has done everything in its power to maintain the narrative according to which it is the greatest defender of freedom and democracy. Its mobilization of fascist forces around the world has therefore been done under the cover of liberalism, as if it were spreading freedom and democracy.
Mm-hmm.
In order to break, then, with this dominant ideological concept of fascism and restore its theoretical use value, it is helpful to distinguish between, it's helpful to clarify the precise historical relationship between fascism and liberalism. The next section is entitled Liberalism and Fascism, Partners in Capitalist Crime. The dominant.
What the fuck? Liberalism and fascism, partners in capitalist crime. This guy is so on the nose. It's not even funny. That is the most on the nose thing I have ever. I've listened to thousands of hours of this shit. That is one of the most on the nose things I have ever heard a communist say in terms of really showing the quiet part out loud. Liberalism and fascism are partners in capitalist crime. Are you shitting me? Yeah, we should clip this and make sure that James gets a copy of it. Actually, let me clip it now. Let's clip it now. Let me just do it. Just doing it.
And restore its theoretical use value, it is helpful to distinguish between, it's helpful to clarify the precise historical relationship between fascism and liberalism. The next section is entitled Liberalism and Fascism, Partners in Capitalist Crime. The dominant bourgeois.
Okay, let's just clip that. And if I need to go back and make a second clip, I will go back and make a second clip, but we've got that one for right now. Okay, continue. Professor, continue.
Partners in capitalist crime. The dominant bourgeois concept of fascism presents it as the opposite of liberalism. And it also defines the very essence of the fight against fascism as the struggle for liberalism. Now, some of this makes sense insofar as liberal modes of governance tend to protect democratic rights for at least certain segments of the population. And I think particularly in a moment like the moment that we're in, the defense of liberal democratic rights is absolutely 100% necessary.
Fuck off, Master Shake.
That said, the idea that liberalism and fascism would be in fundamental opposition to one another misses something absolutely essential. And that is that fascism and liberalism are both forms of political management of capitalism. The oft-cited exemplary cases of Italy and Germany.
Liberalism and fascism are both cases of the political management of capitalism.
One another misses something absolutely essential. And that is that fascism and liberalism are both forms of political management of capitalism.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Okay.
The oft-cited exemplary cases of Italy and Germany that I was talking about a moment ago are highly revealing in this regard. In Italy, in October of 1922, magnates in the Confederation of Industry, so some of the richest capitalists in Italy, provided Mussolini with millions in order to organize his march on Rome as a spectacular show of force. Fascism rises through the support of the capitalist ruling class. It is what you would call astroturf, right? Grassroots movements come organically from below. Astroturfing is a term for when you create the illusion that things come from below by parachuting finances from above. Fascism, as far as I know, at least all of the movements that I've studied, are astroturfed movements. Italy is a great example of it. But what's interesting is Mussolini did not seize power. He had the capitalist class behind him. He'd done the March on Rome. He could have immediately declared a dictatorship. He didn't do that. Instead, he insisted on having...
Mayonnaise is not coded language for people who are new. I fucking hate mayonnaise. Mayonnaise is terrorism. I don't want to hear about fucking mayonnaise. Master Shake needs to fuck off. I don't want to hear anything more about mayonnaise. We are watching a college lecture about fascism. There is no need to talk about the most terrorist of all fucking condiments, okay?
Elections and running a common slate in the elections with the liberals. The fascists had only 35 seats in parliament, but thanks to the common slate with the liberals, they gained 286 seats in the parliament. This same basic pattern of ruling class financial backing and liberal complicity, right? We have to keep both of those things in mind. Ruling class backing and liberal complicity. This same pattern was visible in Germany. In a speech on October 19, 1935, Hitler reminisced on what it meant to have the material resources necessary to support 1,000 Nazi orators with their own cars who could hold some 100,000 public meetings in the course of a year. And this money was the industrialists in Germany, as well as actually US foreign direct investment under the Nazis rose extensively. And many US capitalists invested very directly in Hitler. Ford is the most famous, but there are many, many others. Prior to the election, the Communist Party candidate Ernst Thälmann had argued that a vote for the conservative Field Marshal von Hindenburg amounted to a vote for Hitler and for war. Only weeks after Hindenburg's election, he invited Hitler to become chancellor.
Yeah,
so Hitler became chancellor via an election and then an appointment. Fascism in both cases came to power through bourgeois parliamentary democracy, in which big capital bankrolled the candidates who would do its bidding while also creating a populist spectacle, false revolution, that marshaled or suggested mass appeal. Once its power was consolidated, it unflinchingly set about, and the rhythm was different, right? In Italy, it was very slow, the change. In Germany, they hit the gas pedal very quickly. But in both cases, they crushed organized labor, eradicated opposition parties, destroyed independent publications, put a halt to elections, scapegoated and eliminated racialized underclasses, privatized public assets, launched projects of colonial expansion, and invested heavily in a war economy beneficial to its industrial supporters. So capitalist states with bourgeois democracies at the time refused to form an anti-fascist coalition with the Soviet Union, a country that 14 of them had invaded and occupied from 1918 to 1920 in a failed attempt to destroy the world's first workers' republic. During the Spanish Civil War, Western liberal democracies did not.
Where the fuck is Amalek when we need him? Amalek is never around at the right times. Amalek would be loving this right now because he just told me that I needed to look into the Spanish Civil War like last week.
Officially support the left-leaning government that had been elected. Franco, of course, who was the fascist who was opposed to the left-wing government that had come to power through elections, is, according to his own words, a fascist. He has a number of articles where he explains that he is himself a fascist. In 1934, the United Kingdom, France, and Italy signed the Munich Agreement, in which they agreed to allow Hitler to invade and colonize the Sudetenland in Czechoslovakia. Indeed, it was the fear of being left to confront Hitler alone that eventually drove Stalin, since 1934, the unswerving champion of an alliance with the West against Hitler, into the Stalin-Ribbentrop Pact of August 1939, by which he hoped to keep the USSR out of the war. This non-aggression pact was then disingenuously presented in the Western media as an undeniable indication that the Nazis and communists were somehow allies. There's been a study that was done that's quite interesting that showed that if that pact hadn't been signed, the non-aggression pact, it bought time for the Soviet Union to build up its productive forces and its war capacity. And if they hadn't done that, then there's a much stronger possibility that the Soviets would have lost the war against the Nazis. And if the Nazis had won against the Soviet Union, then we'd be, speaking German in France now. I mean, it'd be a very, very different world. And that's the tip of the iceberg.
So many things would be different.
The
So
German
many
Nazis killed, according to some statistics, 6 million people in gas chambers.
Some
They had plans to kill
statistics.
60 million. in the
Wait,
East. They were
wait.
going to
That
genocidally eliminate.
that seems a little anti-Semitic to me. That seems a little anti-Semitic. Did he just say that some statistics have it at 6 million? What about all statistics, Professor?
France now. I mean, it'd be a very, very different world. And that's the tip of the iceberg. There'd be a lot more. The German Nazis killed, according to some statistics, 6 million people in gas chambers. They had plans to kill 60 million.
That's an anti-Semitism.
They were going to genocidally eliminate the socialist alternative of the Soviet Union. That was the plan. Hitler spelled it out.
Did he just say that Hitler's real plan was to kill all the socialists? He literally just said that Hitler's real plan was to kill all the socialists. Oh. Based. Again, Professor?
In France now. I mean, it'd be a very, very different world. And that's the tip of the iceberg. There'd be a lot more. The German Nazis killed, according to some statistics, 6 million people in gas chambers. They had plans to kill 60 million in the East. They were going to genocidally eliminate the socialist alternative of the Soviet Union. That was the plan.
They were going to genocidally eliminate the socialist alternative of the Soviet Union. That was the plan. Based? I mean, I didn't like Hitler before. Obviously, Hitler was the worst person that ever lived. But, I was not aware until this very moment that Hitler's ultimate plan was to genocidally eliminate the socialist alternative of the Soviet Union. This was completely news to me, and I think that would have been, I can't say that I wouldn't have supported that. Wow! Things I never thought I would hear a college professor say. One more time, and then we'll let it play, just for fun.
Nazis killed, according to some statistics, 6 million people in gas chambers. They had plans to kill 60 million in the East. They were going to genocidally eliminate the socialist alternative of the Soviet Union. That was the plan.
Based.
Hitler spelled it out, and Stalin knew it was coming, and he had to buy time in order to defend the people against fascist onslaught. So liberalism and fascism are best understood as capitalist modes of political management.
Yep.
The former rules primarily by consent, and the latter
I gotta
principally
clip
by
this.
repression.
I have to clip this. I have to clip it. I have to clip this. I have to. This is just too fucking good. I have to do this. Hang on. I was gonna wait and make a clip of myself later, but I can't.
And that's the tip of the iceberg. There'd be a lot more. The German Nazis killed, according to some statistics, 6 million people in gas chambers. They had plans to kill 60 million in the East. They were going to genocidally eliminate the socialist alternative of the Soviet Union. That was the plan. Hitler spelled it out, and Stalin knew it was coming, and he had to buy time in order to defend the people against fascist onslaught. So liberalism and fascism are best understood as capitalist modes of political management. The former rules primarily by consent, and the latter principally by repression. But they often work in tandem with one another. Liberalism, we might say, is the good cop of capitalism, and fascism is the bad cop. They both work together to ensure capitalist dominion. And this metaphor is important because, of course, if you have a choice between a good cop and a bad cop, it's much better to be working with somebody who's going to bring you coffee, let you make a phone call, try to cozy up to you, than somebody who's going to be, getting a sledgehammer out and torturing you. So there should be no kind of ultra-leftist perversion of the argument that I'm making. They work in tandem with one another to manage a capitalist society. But if we have to choose between the two, we have a much better chance working with the liberal good cop than the fascist bad cop.
Holy shit! That just kept getting better and better and better and better and better. So the communist professor is like, listen, we all know that liberalism and fascism are the same thing, right? Like, we all know they're working together, but if we have to choose to work with one of them, we're going to work with the liberals because the fascists are going to kick our asses. They're saying that the liberals are going to let them get away with shit that the fascists would never let them get away with. They're literally saying we can get some stuff done under liberalism. We can work with the liberals because they'll let us make a phone call and they're not going to take a sledgehammer to our knees or anything. But those evil fascists are going to try to destroy us. And those fascists are literally going to try to genocide us, just like they tried to genocide the people in the Soviet Union. So we can't work with the fascists because they're literally going to kill us. But the liberals will let us get away with shit and they'll be nice to us and they're still capitalists and they still lead to fascism and we don't like them. But we're going to pretend to like liberals because they let us get away with shit the fascists don't let us get away with. That was me. Did I actually get that clip? Hang on. If I didn't get that clip, we're going to have to listen to it again. Did I not get that? Oh, I'm still recording. I'm literally still recording. Okay, that's why I didn't get the clip. Okay, I got the clip. All right. Let's continue.
Just in the interest of time, I'm going to jump over a few things that I'd be happy to discuss in the Q&A if I'm okay on time, and change gears a little bit, because what I'm interested in sharing with you, and this is all ongoing research, is how then to draw on this kind of conceptual mapping of fascism to understand the current moment, and more specifically, the incoming Trump administration.
Oh, good.
So the Trump administration will not and has not changed the fundamental orientation of US foreign policy in any deep manner, and I'll get to some of the details. Having filled his administration with neoconservative war hawks, it is on course to intensify imperialist objectives in West Asia with the Greater Israel Project and the hybrid war on China, as well as progressive states and movements around the world.
He knows about the Greater Israel Project? This guy's based.
This imperialist tactic is slightly different than that of the Democrats. The Democrats had focused on the proxy war in the Ukraine against Russia, but the overall strategy of strengthening US-led imperialism is the same, right? The Democrats have been arguing for decades now that, well, we can fight Russia with China in the background more or less at the same time. The Republican, and particularly the Trump orientation, is China's the principal enemy. Let's try to cozy up to Russia, do a kind of Sino-Soviet split, and get Russia at least, somewhat more on our side so that we can fight China principally. It's certainly the case that the Trump administration has worked to present itself as dedicated to global peace, when in fact it is above all devoted to pursuing imperialist hybrid wars while using some different tactics than the Democrats, in part to make it look like they're doing something fundamentally different. The war in the Ukraine was lost by NATO forces. And so when Trump comes in and presents it as if he's making some peace deal. We shouldn't be confused about what's going on. Russia won the war. They're never going to tell you that. They're never going to announce it. The US doesn't lose wars, even though they've been losing every war since Vietnam, with only a few exceptions. Grenada in 1983, tiny island country. And many of the wars are very long and very drawn out, but the psychological warfare campaign is very clear: projection of power, never admit defeat. And so a lot of that narrative is just playing into the overall interests of US imperialism. Regarding domestic policy, the United States has historically maintained a bourgeois democracy for certain segments of the population. Of course, from its founding, the indigenous population, the African population, the propertyless population, and women all had inferior statuses of differing degrees, many of them lacking human and political rights, some of them having human rights but no political rights, etc. There is a notorious study that I hope some of you have read from Princeton that demonstrated very clearly that the average citizen within the United States has little to no bearing on public policy, whereas major corporations through their lobbies have a major impact on public policy. Basically demonstrating that if you define a democracy by people having power, US people who can vote have no power, therefore you draw the conclusion. I don't think you have to take a sophisticated logic class to arrive at the appropriate conclusion that it's an oligarchic plutocracy, not a democracy. There is also a very powerful police state that—
When socialists and communists say democracy, they mean socialism. They don't mean what the United States currently has. They do not believe the United States currently has a democracy. They mean explicitly, we will not have a democracy until we overthrow capitalism or the US government and the Constitution.
Makes constant war on the most oppressed and exploited members of the working class.
Oh, they abolished the police
immigrant
section.
Population and racialized groups. Victims of this police state, like George Jackson, have described it as fascist in its repression of the working class. And the US has established the largest prison and detention system in the world, not to mention a global system of carceral black sites. So in spite of some tactical disagreements, both the Democrats and the Republicans partake in what I would describe as imperial fascism, meaning the use of fascist death squads.
Both the Democrats and the Republicans engage in imperial fascism.
So in spite of some tactical disagreements, both the Democrats and the Republicans partake in what I would describe as imperial fascism, meaning the use of fascist death squads, dictatorships, and militias around the world. It's a very well documented history. Just to cite one example, William Bloom, a former member of the State Department who then turned against the State Department, has documented in great detail that there's only one country in the world that has endeavored to overthrow some 50 foreign governments since World War II, the majority of which were democratically elected. Anyone like? Yes. Beginning, yeah. And so in that regard,
yeah, it's not wrong.
There's a great quote by Victor Marchetti, who had served in the CIA for about 12 years, I think, maybe 15. And he said, "We support every half-assed dictator, military junta, and death squad around the world. And we do it because it serves our interests, principally our business interests." The other aspect of fascism that both the Democrats and the Republicans agree on is police state fascism.
Oh.
The use of violent state forces to indiscriminately strip people of their human and political rights is integral, unfortunately, to the history of the United States. And of course, we're seeing an uptick in that violence most recently. So if we engage in a refined analysis of the contemporary United States, we also have to recognize that there is still a liberal bourgeois order. Liberal democracy tends to manage the professional managerial class stratum and the upper layers of the working class, as well as acquiescent members of the domestic population. Fascism, though, is unleashed on the non-acquiescent workers of the global South, as well as the racialized and potentially insurgent underclass on the home front. Rather than complete opposites, these modes of governance function as the good cop liberalism and the bad cop fascism of capitalism. What a dialectical analysis, and dialectical is just in this sense, meaning that you look at how these forms of governance are interrelated and interact with one another. What this dialectical mode of analysis demonstrates is that just like the notorious interrogation tactic, the good cop and bad cop, as much as they would like us to believe that they have opposite agendas, right? This is the whole political theater we're constantly subjected to. The Democrats hate the Republicans and the Republicans hate the Democrats and This is all that we have to focus on. Without the recognition that actually, as Obama said publicly when Trump was first elected, he said, we all play on the same team. That's Team Capital.
Obama's a capitalist?
In this regard, Trump
Wow.
has been very explicit about intensifying the war on the most oppressed and exploited members of the working class. And this is the material objective behind his racism and misogyny, right? The racism and misogyny are very thin cover for a war on the most oppressed and the most exploited members of the working class, who have always been the racialized groups and women. Always under capitalism, I should qualify that. He seeks to escalate this war on the working class by targeting its lowest tiers. And if you're able to drive down the lowest tiers, you bring wages down for all workers. So it's a war on the entire working class.
Seeker is on Twitter. That's why you're not seeing them in the YouTube chat. They're on Twitter. Sorry if this is not a dumb question. I thought they were all about the collective. They are. What does democracy look like according to them? Would people be allowed to vote? Well, it wouldn't be the system as you currently know it, but yeah, people would be allowed to vote. There would be open meetings where everyone could go and participate. Everyone could go and make contributions. Everyone would be required to serve as a leadership at some point or another, though not for an extended period of time. We're talking about very short term limits because they never want anyone to get used to the idea of being in a leadership position, but they need to have people leading things, but they switch out the leaders. So everyone basically gets a turn. But yeah, you would be able to vote on things, but not in the same way as you currently have it now. So for example, they want to abolish the electoral college because they believe it upholds like the capitalist system or whatever. The reason they want to abolish the electoral college is because they believe it's not one person, one vote. Okay. So they want like a one person, one vote environment, which is different than we have now, but that's not a dumb question.
And we should never think that the war against the most exploited and oppressed members of the working class is somehow good for other members of the working class. It's driving their wages down to force us to work for lower wages. That's the whole gambit. And then the goal is to have us get on board with that project by waging the war against the most oppressed and exploited workers, instead of recognizing that we have common cause with them, because we're all members of the working class. And the ruling class is trying to divide
all
us
oppressed
to better conquer us. This is all packaged by Trump in an ultra-nationalist, religiously inflected ideology of scapegoating, a tactic taken directly out of the playbook of so many fascist demagogues. In a phase of imperialist decline, which is the overriding framework of what's going on, the US empire is in decline. The golden age of US empire building was in the 50s, 60s, the kind of golden age of capitalism. It's well behind us. And the leaders of this country know that full well, and so does the ruling class. It's materially obvious to most people that the United States is not economically as well off as it once was. And the idea of making America great again plugs neatly into a logic of nationalist and religious rejuvenation.
Oh, no.
Racist scapegoating.
Not
if it be
that.
against the racialized working class, the immigrants in particular, and or against the Chinese as the representatives of a systemic alternative to imperialism. This project has emboldened and empowered fascist organizations in the United States, like the Proud Boys, the Oath Keepers, and the Three Percenters. It has also been dedicated to dismantling democratic rights.
I will never look at the Proud Boys the same way again after seeing what a retard Enrique Tarrio is. Like, I used to like the Proud Boys, and now anytime I'm like the evil Proud Boys, I'm like, Like, imagine not being able to deal with the Proud Boys. I bent Enrique Tarrio over and fucked him on his own damn show. And you're telling me the Proud Boys are the fascists that are going to solve this situation against the left? I don't think so. Enrique Tarrio couldn't handle me on his own show with 4 of his friends in the background. You think Enrique Tarrio is going to defeat the left? Bruh. Yeah, please. Okay.
The Trump administration, and increasingly making the bourgeois legal state into a gangster capitalist state run by robber barons. Indeed, Trump already worked with reactionary elements of the state and fascist militias, while backed, as always, by the most reactionary elements of the capitalist ruling class and finance capital in particular, to try and overturn the last election. He's also on record repeating that 2024 was the last election.
Enrique Tarrio wasn't even aware that I was talking shit to his face the whole time, which is part of what made it so fun for me, if I'm honest about it. Anyway.
What a dialectical analysis of fascism reveals is that it is a process of socio-political management that comes in different degrees. And our analysis needs to be fine-grained enough that it is attentive to all of the dimensions of governance. It is true that there is not, at this point, an open fascist dictatorship in the United States. And that's a very good thing. I think we can all agree, hopefully. I don't know if there's any naysayers in here. Anyone who's serious about practical politics should defend liberal rights and democratic rule over their fascist annihilation. The reason for criticizing liberal democracy, as Domenico Lasordo and others have trenchantly argued, is not to abolish it, but rather to transform its false universalism, right? Liberalism says we're all free and equal, but we find out that we're actually not. We want to translate that false universalism into a true universalism. That is the goal. It's also the case that the ideological bedrock of the United States is that it's an anti-fascist democratic country intent on spreading freedom and democracy. Although this is patently untrue in many ways, there's nonetheless a powerful historical narrative and institutions that have been established along these lines. Changing this takes time. The current administration is arresting, detaining, and deporting immigrants and activists without respecting due process and basic democratic rights. It's obviously testing the waters to see how far it can get. And there's every reason to think that these activities will expand. However, it is not, or has not, disappeared some 30,000 people as the Argentine dictatorship, backed by the Central Intelligence Agency and the United States, did in Latin America. It's not running mass extermination camps like the Nazis did, right? So we have to be able to see that fascism as a process is not an all or nothing phenomenon. In French, they talk about fascisation. So it's a process of, it sounds awkward in English, fascistization, you know, the becoming fascist. That's what's going on. Although Trump attempted to undermine the last election, he didn't succeed. And he has not, at least yet, been able to completely transform the bourgeois state into an open dictatorship. Fascism needs to be understood as a process with different degrees of intensification. The version we are currently exposed to is a lower grade than the examples of Argentina and the Nazis that I just cited, but it nonetheless shares the same fundamental orientation: anti-communist, pro-imperialist, and reactionary. What the Trump administration represents then is an ongoing intensification of imperial and police state fascism, combined with an open war on democratic rights, a rolling back of the bourgeois rule of law, and an effort to embolden parastate fascist forces. Right, 1,600 people convicted of seditious conspiracy were let out of prison by Trump. The degree of fascistization, sorry for the awkward formulation, will depend on class struggle, as well as on the overall economic and geopolitical situation. The US's imperial decline and the rise of China as the shepherd of a multipolar world is the overall context within which the capitalist ruling class invested in Trump in order to try and rejuvenate their super profits and halt China. That's the goal. It is unlikely, for many reasons, that he will succeed in this task. though he will certainly engage in more drastic measures. This lack of success will lead, however, as it already has, to an intensification of the class war on workers in the United States. When colonialism meets limits abroad, it brings it to the home front. That, I think, is a very well-established historical front. When US-led imperialism cannot get super profits by subjugating workers in the colonial periphery, it brings that war on workers much more intensely to the home front. As its imperial dominion declines, the repressive tactics used around the world will increasingly be used on its own population to maintain capitalist super profits by any means necessary. When imperialism doesn't succeed abroad, right, this is what I just said, then violent tactics are brought to bear on its local population. We already see in this war on the most exploited and oppressed members of the working class, the immigrant population. The point of this war is not to eliminate the immigrant working class, but rather to make their conditions so difficult that they're willing to work for less. The US economy depends on immigrant labor. They don't want to get rid of them. They'll never say that publicly, but the economy depends on them. But they want to drive wages down for all workers, and they also are waging a war on consumers. The tariffs are that. Who pays for the tariffs? We pay for the tariffs. It's a war on consumers. So every time you hear the percentages, think, well, next time I go and buy X, Y, or Z, I'm going to be paying more. And where's that money go? To a gangster capitalist state captured by the most reactionary elements of the financial ruling class who want to squeeze us that much more. One unique feature of the United States is that the organized anti-capitalist left has been decimated from years of war. The so-called left has been effectively redefined as a pro-capitalist and pro-imperialist left. Although there's a fringe moment of parties and organizations representing a socialist alternative to the capitalist mainstream, these have much less power and weight than in most capitalist countries, including others in the imperial core. The very culture of leftism has been largely, although not completely, destroyed in the United States. This is one of the important organizing tasks in the leading imperialist country. We need to develop institutions, organizations, networks, media, and educational platforms necessary to sustain the development of a real anti-capitalist culture. Another characteristic of the United States is that its working class, as part of the labor aristocracy, meaning a working class that is at the very top of international pyramids of labor, has been notoriously conservative and anti-communist. Both its position in global value chains, so the fact that it's at the top of the pyramid, and its indoctrination by imperial culture industries have made it loath to oppose imperialism and support the socialist struggle against it. Rather than a revolutionary or proto-revolutionary working class, the US government is facing a working class that has been largely domesticated, particularly when compared to the high points of labor struggles in the history of the United States or internationally. Nevertheless, there's a very insurgent labor movement that is arguably gaining strength, and the current state of the world is radicalizing an increasing number of people. I just have a few minutes left. I don't know how we're doing for time. Yeah.
Q&A, Q&A,
Wrap it up
Q&A.
quickly. So the way I see the current state of the world is that the contradictions of global class struggle between the imperialist forces and the anti-imperialist forces are sharpening. And the war on the domestic working class is intensifying. So it's very likely that more people are going to come to question the viability of the system they live in. We're also facing a world where capitalist-driven climate change is eliminating the conditions of possibility of human existence.
Capitalist-driven climate change.
For humanity, according to the United Nations, there could be no more Homo sapiens in 50 years. So the state of class struggle, the state for the struggle of the nature of the world that we want has never been higher. It's an existential struggle for life. What that means is a lot more people are going to get radicalized because they're going to recognize that former generations didn't do the hard work necessary to move the world in the direction that we need. This is one of the reasons why the war on journalism and education is so central to the current administration. As class struggle intensifies on the home front, due to the violence of imperialism in decline, as well as the patent fact that the capitalist-driven destruction of the biosphere is rendering life impossible or will soon, more people are going to be pushed into questioning the dominant system. Misdirecting their frustrations will be absolutely central to the maintenance of the system. They have to destroy education. They have to destroy journalism. They can't deal with an informed public that's getting radicalized due to the state of the world. They need the stultification of the US public because it's a bedrock element of the way they rule. William Casey, head of the Central Intelligence Agency under Ronald Reagan, when asked to describe the role of his agency, the CIA, said the following: "We will know our disinformation program is complete when everything the American public believes is false." That's the agenda. The long-standing project of rendering the US American population ignorant is also a very important factor in analyzing the state of contemporary fascism. Given, unfortunately, how uneducated the general public is, which is due to no fault of its own, but because of the disinformation industries operative in schools and the media and the war on education and journalism.
It's all
as well as
capitalism.
the overworking of the population, right? People working 3 jobs don't have as much time to educate themselves or be educated. So we're dealing with a situation in which the general public isn't as informed as it could otherwise be. And such a population is much more malleable to ruling class agendas. So I'm going to just jump to the conclusion. So in conclusion, then, I'd like to address, well, no, actually, I'm going to leave, I think, the rest of this to, I can get to this in the Q&A or it will come up. I guess maybe I'll just say one final thing in conclusion, and that is that although this talk hasn't been as gay and happy as hopefully my opening comments were about how happy I am to be back in Kansas, there is something that is really
Gay.
important and
It was fake and
worthy
gay.
of excitement. And that is that if you think in a distinction between subjective experience, like my experience as an individual, we are living in a world where if you're not a member of the ruling class, and I assume that most people here are not, meaning, you know, I think it's 4 or 5 US Americans who own the equivalent of what 50% of the entire population owns, right? These are people who are super rich, and that wealth comes from the immiseration of everyone else. Doesn't fall out of the sky. If you're not one of those people, then subjectively and individually, most likely your lives, like my life, are going to get a lot worse. That's the negative. But the positive is, if you look at global history, what we're living through is the decline of the US empire. The US is not as powerful economically, militarily, culturally, etc., as it once was. This creates an incredible, incredible opportunity. An opportunity to break the imperial stranglehold that the United States has operated on, around the world in order to not just liberate ourselves, but also those in the global South who have been under the jackboot of US imperialism. And so sometimes you have to make subjective sacrifices for the overall gain of humanity and the objective course, hopefully, of history, which will depend on us and what we do. But we can contribute to a world in which
All right, I gotta pee again. I'll be right back. Let me know if I miss anything.
Instead of the reactionary ruling class that is trying to divide, conquer, and ultimately destroy all of us and the planet in due course. So I was trying to be optimistic, but I think I added on a kind of negative note there. Hopefully someone has a little levity to bring to the Q&A. Thank you so much for your time. And I look forward to
next, we have the Q&A. Yeah, turn that on. Emma, could you grab that mic real quick? Just turn it on. The way this will work is you can walk up to the front, stand in line for the microphones. I'll pick from one from each side, and we'll try to get through as many questions as possible. Let's be clear, ask one question. Try not to give a large preface. I know many of us have lots of thoughts in our heads, but maybe we can save them for conversation later. To do as best you can, come up with your question, have it prepared. We'd love to hear what you have to say. So go ahead and line up quickly, and then I will call on you in just a moment.
Q&A is always the best part. We love Q&A. They always say the quiet part out loud. Although he's already said a lot of the quiet part out loud.
We'll
So
start over here on the right.
Hello. My name is Chris, and I just wanted to ask real quickly. Earlier, you mentioned how Russia had already won the war in Ukraine. Could you please talk more about that and why you claim that to be the case?
Should we take one question at a time, or
Yes, one question at a time.
Yeah. Well, I think it's I'm not a military analyst, but the best military analysts that I've read and listened to all agree that what occurred in, or has been occurring in Ukraine, is it began in 2014 as a US-backed fascist coup d'etat against a democratically elected leader. And the eastern regions of Ukraine seceded because they said, we don't want to be part of a fascist-controlled country. And then Ukraine, with US backing, began waging a war on the Russian separatist movement in the east. In doing that, they killed 14,000 people between 2014 and the beginning of the Russian military special operation. That's the broader context, which I think is very important to understand. And what Russia has claimed is that they wanted to support the separatist movement and denazify Ukraine. They have not unleashed the full force of their military. The Russian military is an awesome force to be dealt with. And they have technologies that surpass, like the hypersonic missiles, surpass what the United States has. And what they have done is they've consolidated control of eastern Ukraine. And they're now in a situation where in the negotiations, as far as I can tell, most, if not all of the cards are in their hands. And in that sense, they've attained their principal objectives. And I don't think their objective was ever to take over all of Ukraine. Their objective was to have a land bridge to Crimea and to annex the Russian separatist regions of eastern Ukraine. This might lead to a further debate, but yeah.
Choose between the two. Thank you for your question. A much better chance. Go on that side of the room. Good cow than the fascist.
Okay. So you sort of laid out your definition of what fascism is a little bit earlier. In your opinion, was the Roman Empire and subsequently the Byzantine Empire fascist by your definition?
Oh, wow.
That's an interesting question, because I do think that.
Oh, you guys could hear the clip?
Fascism, you
Oh,
can
sorry.
look at the way in which what
Sorry.
fascism principally.
I didn't realize the sound was set up so you guys could hear the clip. Sorry. I was trying to edit the clip at the same time as I was trying to listen. Sorry. Why is that like that? Do I have the sound set up wrong? I do. I have the sound set up wrong. Okay. Well, guess what? The clip is edited. There you go. Let me make sure the clip is actually edited. There it is. Okay. Now the clip is actually edited. Hey, we'll be able to tweet the clip when the stream is over. Okay, let's continue. Everyone focus.
It does is it's when the reactionary elements of the capitalist ruling class astroturf parastate forces, so militias and things like this, in order to push an anti-worker agenda, and in doing that, rejuvenate the super profits that they want. And that practice, I think, has been systemic to a lot of what's happened under 20th century capitalism, but it continues a tradition that you see earlier in the colonial escapades of the capitalist countries. So if you take that definition and you compare it, for instance, to what the Ohio militia was doing in running scalping campaigns, where there were militias supported by the ruling class and the US government who were paid to scalp the indigenous population in Ohio, this looks a lot like fascism. It just, the concept wasn't around, the term wasn't used, but the colonial violence is in deep continuity with fascism. M.A. Césaire has written poignantly on this. Now, then to compare that to earlier manifestations like the Roman or Byzantine empires, it's an interesting question because I do think that under class societies, there are regularly forms of extremely violent and repressive rule that have been mobilized. I don't know for certain if you could, in a coherent manner, apply the category of fascism, at least in the sense that with the Romans, from what I understand, the Byzantine Empire I know less, these were conscripted soldiers or soldiers who were forced to fight. I'm not familiar with a kind of external funding of parastate forces, meaning not members of the military.
The question was essentially, was the Roman Empire fascist?
Parastate is just parallel to the state, right? So the Ku Klux Klan is a parastate organization. There are many members of the police and the FBI in the Ku Klux Klan, but when they had their hoods on, they were parastate, if you will. And so in that sense, it seems like our concept might get a little sloppy, if you will. Does that help?
Thank you for your question. Go ahead.
So at the end of your talk, you kind of mentioned a bit of like a spark of positivity. The idea that like we may be seeing essentially the death struggle of the American empire. I wanted you to kind of sorry, brain. Could you discuss a little bit what you kind of hope that will look like in moving towards a more free society, and maybe what that free society you hope would look like?
Yeah, it's a little difficult to channel those images right now, I'll admit. But
yeah, what does the socialist society look like? Good question.
The best elements, I think, of worker struggles in the United States have demonstrated is that when people work together across races, across genders, across sexualities, even across class strata, because the working class is stratified, and they come together as a unified force, they can exercise an incredible amount of power. And if that power is well organized and focused, then it can shift power in the direction of a more egalitarian society, and egalitarian in two senses, both politically, so that everyone has equal rights, political rights and human rights, but also economically, egalitarian not in the sense that you're going to level everything out, everything's going to be the same, but so you don't have the massive discrepancies of wealth that we have in this country, which are absolutely disgusting, because wealth is relational. The reason you have rich people is because you have poor people. And the reason you have richer people is because the poor get poorer. It's relationally constituted. And so what I would hope for is a resolutely unified, transracial, working class movement that pushes in the direction of economic equality, political equality, and the other major factor is what's driving climate change is a capitalist system that maximizes profit over people and the planet.
See?
And that has to be stopped. So
I literally just got asked this question yesterday, I think. Someone said, it was either yesterday or like late last week. Someone said, Karlyn, why does the left believe that capitalism caused climate change? They believe that capitalism prioritizes profits over people, and therefore capitalism makes decisions that are literally destroying the planet. And ergo, if we don't overthrow capitalism, we are all literally going to die. They really do believe this. They believe everyone on the planet is going to die if we don't overthrow capitalism, because capitalism caused climate change. And the only way to stop climate change is to overthrow the system that created it, which is capitalism. Listening in.
I would hope for is a resolutely unified, transracial, working class movement that pushes in the direction of economic equality, political equality, and the other major factor is what's driving climate change is a capitalist system that maximizes profit over people and the planet. And that has to be stopped. So how we get there is a whole nother question. But I'm absolutely certain that you need organization, power, and unity of purpose. Does that help?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your question. Go ahead.
I actually don't have a question. I just wanted to
We can chat.
thank you for coming back to Kansas. One hayseed to another. I know there's been some darker notes with this, but it's kind of contrary to that, it's actually been deeply reassuring, or maybe almost to the point of confirmation bias, as somebody who, even as he's woefully uneducated in these matters and is trying to play catch up, to have a speaker that can alleviate some of the stress of thinking that,
Guys, I just tweeted that video, so go retweet the video. Go share the video.
helps with that reassurance as well. So I wanted to thank you again for
Please.
coming back to K-State.
Well, thank you. I greatly, greatly appreciate it. And it's also true that I feel alone at times, and the building of community, connecting with people, connecting to their humanity, and seeing that at the end of the day, if we're going to improve this, it's not because I'm going to give a good lecture. Hopefully it was good. I don't want to not that narcissistic or something. Or writing something important or having one conversation. It's because we're all going to work together, and you're going to make your contribution and you'll make yours, and we'll all find common purpose. And the other thing that I would say is that one of the reasons that for me, the work that I've been doing is focused on the political situation is because coming from Kansas too, I grew up doing a lot of farm work, doing a lot of construction work. And my first intellectual inclinations were, I wanted to understand why exploitation existed. I wanted to understand why alienation existed. And I also wanted to understand why my mother's life was so unhappy, because she's an intellectual who wasn't allowed to go to college because they saved money for the son to go to college. And she didn't have a working day that
Is that real?
Because she was taking care of us, and the working day for women in the way in which society is structured, at least in traditional families, is never over. So at the end of the day, the struggle against exploitation, alienation, and the super exploitation of racialized groups and women is the, I think, most important struggle. So if we can find common cause on that and give ourselves a theoretical framing to allow us to move on those things, then I think really great things not only can be done, but they have been done, right? They have been done. You look at history, why are there women in the university? Why are there people of color in the university? It's because people fought for that, and they fought and they won, and we're on their coattails. But it's now also our turn to step up. So I appreciate really the active solidarity and community building. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Persephone. I'm from the Kansas Socialist Book Club, and I just wanted to reiterate Peter's comments that
Persephone sounds
you
male.
shouting out educational, grassroots institutes, and love your message. But in the communist spirit of criticism to improve ideas, one of the things that you mentioned during your speech that I'd like some more maybe clarification on was when you made the comment regarding liberalism and how what we should seek out of it is not to promote it or antagonize it to undermine capitalism, but to kind of universalize the values that liberalism claims to have, like universal enfranchisement and so on. I was just wondering, what would you say to the examples of, for example, the CPI, Communist Party of Italy, the SPD, the German Social Democratic Party? Because at least to me, I might be misunderstanding, but it seems like they were very much tried to do what you said. That was kind of the approach they took, and in both cases, history demonstrably proves that and demonstrates that their methods were not successful. So
hang
I was
on,
just wondering,
hang
what
on.
would you kind of respond to that?
I tell people all the time that their job when they come to my channel is to literally shut the fuck up and listen, because when new people speak on the channel in the chat before they've shut the fuck up and listened, they say really stupid things. Michael here says the number one reason why the Democrats indoctrinate students into woke, trans, and queer ideology is because everyone they indoctrinate and transition will become a Democratic Party voter for life. Michael, I'm very, very sorry, but you really should have spent more time listening and less talking. Queer Marxists do not vote for Democrats. Queer Marxists are not the same thing as Democrats. Democrats are not indoctrinating people into queer and trans ideology. Marxists are indoctrinating people into queer ideology. Queer is not the same thing as trans. If you had watched the stream yesterday, you would know all this stuff. And no, they're not voting for the Democrats because they don't vote in elections, because they don't believe in elections, because they want to overthrow the government. So no, Michael, there's literally nothing you put in this chat that's correct. So my recommendation is that you should be quiet and stop talking and realize that you don't know what you're talking about. And you should go and listen to yesterday's stream, the whole fucking thing. And I don't want you skipping around. I don't want you fast forwarding. You listen to all of yesterday's stream and then you can come back and talk again. But until you go and listen to all of yesterday's stream, we don't want to hear from you again.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I thrive on criticism. I mean, I had a very, or still have, a very domineering authoritarian father. And so I always had to try to prove him wrong about everything. And so that was one of the ways I cut my teeth and became hopefully a better intellectual. The CPI, you mean the original CPI that Gramsci and Togliatti were part of?
Yes.
Okay. Because the history of the CPI and the SPD are quite different. Because the CPI was in the Third International and was a revolutionary socialist organization. The SPD is a social democratic party in the sense that they believe that you could reform your way out of capitalism. And they advocated, at least originally, for a kind of evolutionary form of socialism. And
did he just say the Nazis were reformists? Hang on. Oh, the SPD. Okay.
The CPI, you mean the original CPI that Gramsci and Togliatti were part of?
Yes.
Okay. Because the history of the CPI and the SPD are quite different. Because the CPI was in the Third International and was a revolutionary socialist organization. The SPD is a social democratic party in the sense that they believe that you could reform your way out of capitalism. And they advocated, at least originally, for a kind of evolutionary form of socialism. And at one level, historically, this made sense. Like in the early 20th century, it made sense to think, well, if you have democracy and most—
No. What did I just tell you? What did I just tell you? You're new. You need to learn to shut the fuck up and listen. This is going to be your first lesson, Michael. Shut the fuck up and listen. They are not foot soldiers of the Democrats. They fucking hate the Democrats. Had you been listening at all on this stream, this entire fucking talk is about the fucking Democrats supporting fascism, bro. Literally the stream that you're watching right now, what this communist professor is saying is the Democrats support fascism. They fucking hate the Democrats. So, Michael, I'm going to say this to you again, and I expect you to listen this time, and if you don't fucking listen, you're not going to like the results. You are in my classroom right now. Your job is to sit down, understand that you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. You have no idea. I don't care how old you are. I don't care how much clickbait conservative content you've watched. I do not care. I do not care. You didn't even get my fucking name correctly, bro. My name is right on the screen right now. You could have at least gotten my name correct. I don't care what your favorite fucking conservative influencer has told you. I don't care how many hours of Fox News you've watched. You don't know shit about shit. Sit down, shut the fuck up, listen to what's being said, ask questions. You are not allowed to make any more statements in the chat. The only thing that you are allowed to do right now is to ask questions. And if you ask good enough questions, then you can start to make other contributions. But until you unlearn all the bullshit that's sitting around in your brain, do not speak. Do not try to distract other people in the chat. Do not spread misinformation and lies. You are in my classroom now. I am not in yours.
people are workers. And under monopoly capitalism, there are fewer and fewer people with more money and more workers. You can just vote them out of power. But, and I think this is your point, that's never happened. Like well, I shouldn't say that quite. There are a few exceptions to this. But in general, what Marx said in the 19th century, I think still holds true. The ruling class will never let itself be voted out of power. And so I do think there's a distinction. I take it maybe this is where you're headed in your question to get to the meat of it, is that there are certain tactics that are social democratic that consist in saying, well, what we have to do is organize for the ballot box and focus on voting, and that's how we're going to change the system. There's another form of socialism that's revolutionary socialism that says, I mean, there's different versions of this, but one version, like the CPI version, is yes, we participate in elections, we build power, by operating in elections. We have public platforms. We take strong positions. But at the end of the day, we know that the ruling class is never going to allow itself to be voted out of power. So we also identify the need at certain points in time when the power dynamic is right to see state power. And that's a different position. The revolutionary socialists have been the ones who, at least historically, across the global South, have been quite successful in building
Global
socialist
South means
states.
third world countries.
My defense of liberal democratic rights was not a defense of a social democratic position in the full-blown sense of that term. Instead, what I'm advocating for is that when liberal bourgeois rights were introduced, this was a class compromise. So at the end of the 19th, early 20th century, when you had a series of bourgeois revolutions, these were revolutions driven by the working class. France is a great example of it. They were driven by the working class, but then the mercantile class, the emergent capitalist class that wanted to get rid of the old ruling class, the aristocracy, the landed gentry, the people who owned all the land, they wanted to get rid of them. And so they allied with the working class, but they wanted to make sure that they captured the revolution in such a way that they limited its gains. They didn't want a worker state. They didn't want a revolutionary overthrow of class society in general. They wanted to be the new ruling class. And so bourgeois democracies were a class compromise. We'll set up a system of government where the bourgeoisie, the ruling class, discreetly controls the elections, the state system, et cetera, but will guarantee rights for workers, et cetera. That system is rigged from the inside because it presupposes that the ruling class will actually recognize and respect the rights of the workers, but anytime the workers get really organized and really radical, those rights disappear. So in that sense, we have to recognize it for what it is. And when I say universalize those rights, the rights on paper sound great. All people are free, all people are equal, like there's wonderful statements, but the problem is reality isn't what's on paper. And to make it a reality, you need a state that's in the hands of the people, not a state that's in the hands of the ruling class. And the people who have demonstrated how to get there are, for the most part, those of the global South who have been able to get state power to do it. If you don't have state power, they'll crush you. That, I think, is very clear historically. So, sorry, that was a little bit long-winded, but it was a really rich question, and I appreciate the pushback.
Yeah, thank you. It was a great speech, by the way.
Thank you for your question.
All right, thank you. I just want to say I really enjoyed the talk. I'll definitely be going back to the recording a bunch in the future to, look over it again. My question, I guess I'll go over some really short context. In Black Shirts and Reds, Dr. Michael Parenti describes fascism as almost an immune response to the growing kind of more mature leftist and socialist movements in these, especially Western industrialized countries. And then kind of extending onto that, you mentioned in your speech that that kind of leftist movement has been crushed in the US largely, especially with co-option and COINTELPRO. Now, kind of extending off of that, there's this really great paper from Dr. Germa Bell, who's a Spanish economist, called Against the Mainstream, Privatization in Nazi Germany. And he does a quantitative analysis where he finds that the neoliberal reforms in the 80s privatized to a far greater extent than even the Nazis did when it comes to capital accumulation privatization.
The Nazis
So I guess the
privatized?
question is,
Wow.
without a strong
You
leftist
don't
force
say.
in the US, and with the capitalist class getting basically everything they could want from neoliberalism, I mean, they had the largest amount of accumulation since Reagan over the COVID years. Why would the capitalist class now be moving to a more maybe unstable system by backing fascism and Trump when they've already got everything they want now?
Great question. And I wish I was, I don't know how old you are, but I'm guessing slightly younger than me. And
I'm in school.
What's that?
High school.
You're in high school?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. I wish I was that smart at your age because you're unbelievably well-spoken and you're reading Michael Parenti. Like, everybody should see the lecture now and Black Shirts and Reds, and maybe you'll get as smart as this young gentleman. Very, very impressive. The question is really spot on, and I'd like to, if you could share the Against the Mainstream essay with me, I'd love to read it, the link or a PDF, because I'm not familiar with that.
Yep.
But I think
High school in Kansas.
The question can be addressed by looking at what's happened under neoliberalism. So this will just take a sec, but very quickly, the neoliberal bet was that when the US became the leading imperial power at the end of World War II, between the mid 40s and the end of the 70s, you actually had socialism expanding globally. You had it expanding in the Far East. You had it come to Cuba in 1959. You had Nicaragua. You had the capitalist world was on its heels. And so the neoliberal solution was, how can we break this model of expanding socialism? And how can we reinvigorate our capitalist super profits? And one of the main decisions that was made was to offshore production and financialize the economy. In offshoring the production, then they shifted so much of the productive sites elsewhere, Latin America, Southeast Asia, et cetera. And now the United States has almost fully financialized its economy, right? Like, what do we make? We make bombs, and we make movies about why it's great to drop bombs. And other than that, there's some pharmaceuticals and things like that. But for the most part, the productive economy is not here, and they're not bringing it back. They are not bringing it back. They have no strategic plan to bring it back. This is all a lie. In that regard, though, neoliberalism has exhausted itself. And it's largely exhausted itself because a financial economy can't survive without a productive base. At the end of the day, for the world to work, we need goods and services. We need like highways and bridges that don't collapse and buildings that don't burn down and things like this. And the productive economy being offshored has created a situation where you don't have a productive base in the economy. The US GDP rates, if you look at them—
10 minutes left.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, then the long and short of this is look at the growth of the Chinese economy since 1949, and particularly since the early 80s, and compare them to the United States. China's been growing at 10% a year. The US last year was what, 2.8%? It would love to do 5%. The Chinese economy decided to slow down to 5% to introduce an environmental civilization. That is the principal problem, is that China is the largest economy in the world according to purchasing power parity, and is on course to surpass, in pure terms, GDP terms, the US economy by 2030. If that happens, which it looks like it will happen, that means that there's a new dominant world order that is largely overseen by China and a multipolar world, and imperialism goes back on its heels. That has to be halted. And so I think the principal global conflict is that between the US model and the Chinese alternative. Sorry, there's probably more, but I have the professorial problem of going on at length. So we can continue the conversation hopefully a bit later.
Thank you. I just wanted to say for YDSA members, you might want to let other questions be asked. We'll have more time with Dr. Rocco later. Awesome.
I can speed up too. No, sorry. They're just really great questions.
I don't disagree.
Brilliant high schoolers are reading Michael Parenti. Like, I had no idea that I was coming into this crowd.
Kansas, yeah, I know.
Yeah, I know, it's Kansas, that's right.
Kansas. It's Kansas.
Once again,
Yep,
thank you
it
for
is.
your talk and your speech. It was highly informative. And following those two questions, this might sound a little simplistic, but I was highly fascinated with the concept of astroturfing. I was wondering if you could give some really like small, maybe less known examples and how they were able to materialize and kind of fly under the radar.
Good question, actually.
Does anyone know the 1934 business coup? Is this common knowledge? Maybe one person from the Communist Reading Group? Is that any other weirdos in the room? No, I'm kidding.
No, I have no idea who that is. And the reason that I say no is because we watch real radical revolutionary socialists in the real world, and that is the only thing that we do. That is the research methodology. So I have no effing clue who Jordan Maxwell is, nor do I really care, because I know that there's no Jordan Maxwell that is a relevant activist on the radical far left. So it's not relevant to what I do.
Other than you and me, right? There's solidarity here in the weirdo camp, because the 1934 business coup should be part of common knowledge because it's a great example of astroturfing. The capitalist ruling class in this country, the Morgan interests, the DuPont interests, some of the most powerful elements of the capitalist ruling class decided that the New Deal under FDR was giving too much to the working class. And so what they needed is a fascist-style coup d'etat. They sent an individual to Europe to study 4 different models of fascism. They came back and decided that the model in France was the best possible model to apply to the United States. They honeypotted veterans who were trying to get a bonus that they were due from their service. and they armed them because the DuPont family had a controlling interest in Remington Arms. And they were planning a march on Washington, and they'd identified a man on a white horse by the name of Smedley Butler, who they were going to put forth as
Okay. Jordan Maxwell has no fucking relevance to what I do. Let's just be very clear. This is if Michael, if you're under some sort of weird impression that this is all about Gnosticism, because you've probably been listening to James Lindsay and you really fucking shouldn't. No. We hinge into reality here. We do not deal in fantasy or bullshit or James Lindsay's fucking talking points. My God. Oh, yeah, a James Lindsay fan just wandered in. Yep, exactly. James was even talking about Gnosticism on Twitter earlier today.
Leader of the country. And the plan was not only completely exposed, but Smedley Butler publicly admitted to it.
That's why Michael thinks that the queers are
and
Democrats.
there was great work by a journalist by the name of Spivak, who released all of this internal information, and they were clear. It was a fascist dictatorship, and it was astroturfed. So that would be one very good example. The Stop the Steal rally was also astroturfed, right? This was by the public supermarket interests.
That's
right,
actually true. The Stop the Steal rally was definitely
the Tea Party
astroturfed.
movement is totally astroturfed. Yeah, they have to create this stuff, and they also control the televisual apparatus. And so you can actually, with very small movements, make it look as if it's enormous by the way in which you present things. So those are some quick examples.
He thinks conservatives
Thank you so
control
much.
the TV.
Thank you for your question.
Hi, I'll just go as quick as I can. It's kind of low. You're from Kansas. I'm from Kansas. And when I say I'm from Kansas, I mean my family settled here before the Civil War. So I've lived here for a long time. And
are you that old?
Yeah.
And then part of my family is from England, and they have some socialist roots that have kind of been forgotten, unfortunately, because my great-grandfather died in a coal mining accident in his 20s. But anyway, I just wanted to know your thoughts on Kansas, because I've lived in Kansas my entire life.
Michael, you really should have taken my advice when I told you to shut the fuck up and listen. We have already told you no. We do not listen to people who are not communist activists. If you listen to actual communist activists instead of James Lindsay's bullshit, you would have a much better grasp of what's going on in the world. You want us to listen to a conspiracy theorist who talks about fucking Gnosticism, and you think he's going to inform us about what the left really thinks? Bro, you are now in a 24-hour timeout. You have been banned from the channel for 24 hours for talking. I told you to shut the fuck up. You did not shut the fuck up. All you had to do was literally stop talking and fucking listen, and you couldn't do that. Michael, if you come back after 24 hours and you continue with the Gnosticism fucking bullshit, you will be permanently banned in my chat. And the reason is that there's no possible way that I can take you seriously if you think that some sort of fucking Gnostic fucking expert, whatever the fuck he is going to define the far left. You are not smart enough to be here. That is the IQ test. Can you see through James Lindsay's bullshit or not? Michael, you're failing the IQ test right now. It is now your job to take a 24-hour timeout to think about it. And if you come back, stop spewing bullshit in the chat.
Life, and obviously all of my family has for many generations. And I've lived here for 10 years, and I'm a K-State alumni. I know all of the organizations that do any kind of political action here, not as much as the Republican stuff. That's kind of I can go on because it's very fascinating between all the different relationships.
Really fucking imagine it. Really fucking imagine it. Imagine walking into this talk, which is a socialist professor talking about how liberalism and fascism are capitalism, saying the quiet part out loud over and over and over and over and over again. And the conclusion that you draw is this person is a secret Gnostic and they're using secret language. And we have to refer to a spiritual guru in order to understand the language that this person is using. Like the amount of damage that James Lindsay has done to people can seriously not be overstated. James Lindsay has driven people fucking insane. James Lindsay has massively misinformed people. James Lindsay has lied to millions. And because conservatives love a good Gnostic conspiracy theory and they love saying everything that's not Christian is bad, they're like, do you know what the left is? The left is secret Gnosticism. And if you want to know what the left really thinks, you don't listen to the left. You listen to Gnostic experts that will tell you what the left really thinks, because they're not really socialists and communists. They are secret Gnostics that are trying to indoctrinate everyone into a Gnostic cult. It's like the stupidest. James Lindsay basically like picked out what is the stupidest possible thing that I can convince people of, and people fucking bought it. Because it was served to them on the stage of Turning Point USA. And it was served to them on all of their influencer shows. And it's like, do you people know how to think? I'm not saying to people in the chat who are smart. I'm saying it's like to James Lindsay's audience, do you have a working fucking brain? Are you capable of it? Yeah, James Lindsay literally convinced people that Oprah is the leader of the Gnostic sex cult, New World Order, UN conspiracy theory, and they bought it and they take it seriously. It's fucking infuriating. It's infuriating. Tolkien fan. This chat is not for people with the IQ of room temperature. Exactly. I've been sick and missed this. Oh, welcome back. I am. Welcome back. All right, we are almost done. We are so close to being done.
Many different movements here, like the Black Lives Movement. I've seen, when they were trying to ban abortion, and I've kind of been able to observe how these movements are created and how they evolve, and then the ultimate conclusion. And I do see a lot of resemblance in what you say, particularly with the Black Lives Matter movement. We've had one of the largest protests in the history of Manhattan in here. And the result of that was the street was changed to Martin Luther King Jr. and we've got a larger police budget, but at least one of the organizers was appointed to the law board. So,
yeah.
But anyway, since you're from Kansas, was just wondering if you had observed anything in Kansas at all and have any kind of opinion on the kind of culture here and political movements. And I've also, I'm kind of curious because I don't think a lot of people mention the religious aspect. And my family, I was raised Christian, and it's such a profound influence on how people interact, or how they make the choice to do things. And Karl Marx said that religion is the opium to the masses, and it's pretty clear. So anyway, what do you think?
Yeah, Karl Marx also said that religion is the cry of the oppressed, right? So he also understood that people who are desperate, who are looking.
Socialists believe that people are using religion to cope with the oppression of capitalism, and that religion will naturally die out after capitalism is abolished.
For a better world, will latch onto whatever dominant models there are. And so I think he also had that kind of dual perspective. I left Kansas a long time ago and come back to visit family, and now hopefully will become an integral member of K-State's broader community and come back regularly because I've really enjoyed this conversation. But I don't really know the kind of contemporary organizing scene. I know what it was like years ago. I went to a very rural high school, very right-wing, very racist, very misogynist. Football was the religion, and that kind of world it's difficult to organize in, but at the same time, even when I was in high school, of course, not as brilliant as the man in the back of the room, but I was involved in trying to change things politically. And one thing that I really remember very clearly is the sense that people have an understanding of injustice. They have an understanding of exploitation. They're human beings, after all, whose parents are being crushed by the system. And connecting to their humanity is so essential, because then you can bring that out as a kind of rallying point. At the same time, a lot of my family now lives in Lawrence, which of course is this little bubble of kind of liberals. And that's a very different world. We were having an interesting conversation earlier, though, about prior to the talk, about how important places like Kansas are. Because at the end of the day, you have a part of the country that is dominated by right-wing forces, but also a part of the country that has been enormously abused and crushed by the people in Washington and by the governments within Kansas itself. And so a lot of more radical movements in history, I mean, we're in the land of John Brown, right? I mean, there's some really, really radical legacies in the struggle for a free state. And in the history of the United States, you know, it's not just Kansas, it's places like Appalachia. Like, you should, I think, very keenly identify with the most radical elements of your region, or our region. But then the last thing that I would say is that I really appreciate the question, because in addressing the issue of how to move, I can't remember who asked the question earlier, like, what society do we want and how are we going to get there? And to get there, you can't do it based on what you want. And you can't do it just on what you think, you know, is smart because you read a book or because you watched a TV show or somebody else is doing something. You have to work with the people who are there.
The collective.
And so there's a great
It's not about
called the
you,
mass
it's
line.
about the
The mass
collective.
line is, right, okay, hey, we're us again. So the mass line is, it's all about, you got to learn where people are at. And if they're in Christianity, if they are conservative, they might have reasons for being conservative, right? And they might have very justified ones. I know a lot of Republicans who say the government's screwing us over. I'm like, yeah, they are. The fat cats are screwing us over. Yeah, they are. The news is lying to us. Yeah. Those conservatives, they understand a lot about what's going on. Life is getting worse and harder. Yeah, that's all right. But then you got to
Conservative credit
that
given.
understanding and you frame it in a broader manner so that one can see the class struggle and the forces that are operative, so that people actually fight against those things rather than fighting for them. Because so many people are miseducated into fighting actually against themselves, right? Probably people know the book, What's the Matter with Kansas? The Tom Frank book.
I met him.
What's that?
I met him and I asked him if he read Marx and he kind of, yeah.
I mean, he's
like uneasy. He's just like, oh, I don't know. I'm not.
Final remarks.
Yeah. The point is that what he points out is that many people in Kansas end up voting against their best interest. So in a nutshell, I think it's you meet people where they're at, listen to their suffering, listen to their needs, but then try to give them tools by which they can really meet those needs and really alleviate that suffering. And so unity, disunity, meaning, hey, you got to understand it from this perspective, and then a higher unity where you bring people in, you're like, yeah, I want to fight against the fat cats. I want to fight against the government that's not serving my purposes. I want to fight against fake news. But the way to do it is not by supporting fascist reactionaries. So on that note, yeah.
That's it. That's it. We're done. We're done with the fascism. All right. Very insightful lecture, Dr. Rockhill. I especially appreciated the part where you said that Hitler wanted to genocide the socialists. I thought that was really based. And, you know, I mean, there are a lot of golden nuggets in that. Mostly, I really want people to walk away really understanding that when the left says fascism, they're not talking about individuals. They're talking about the system of capitalism that creates the fascists in the first place. I really need people to understand that. That is the big takeaway. He said it repeatedly all throughout the lecture, and it should be very, very clear that that is what they mean. All right, guys, I have a half-hour break, and then Jennifer and I are going to come back and talk about the Kabbalah, okay? So I'm going to go take a half-hour break, and I will see you guys for Disenrage in about in 30 minutes at 9 p.m., and I'm going to go eat a burrito or something. So I will see you guys in 30 minutes. And yeah, take care. We'll see you soon. Bye.
How are you feeling? How long have you been here?
3 months, May 17th.
And what brought you?
That's difficult to answer.
Could you give me some idea?
I am not completely like other people.
What do you mean by that?
People dislike me because I am not completely like them. I am trying to do with my life something which few people try to do, and this influences my thinking and consequently my action.
What is it you're trying to do with your life?
Play the piano for people.
I'm not clear. How is it that playing the piano for people has eventually resulted in your being here in the hospital?
That's difficult to answer.